Hey, hey,
Hey, hey, what's up, man?
fix that. There we go. It's like
How's it
I've
going,
never done
Brian?
this before. Uh, this is that crazy time of year.
Sure is.
I'm
Uh,
normally on early and I'm jumping on at what, like 2 minutes till.
yeah, I know, me too. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts.
I've been kind of watching the comments as the people have been coming in, and we got people from all over the place. Not sure if everyone's been in here before that's on tonight, but maybe you have. But we got Jason Egan from Lehigh, Utah, which is
Wow.
real close to where my daughter. One of my daughters still lives in Provo, there just south of Lehigh. My other daughter just
Oh,
moved
okay.
back home from Pleasant Grove, Utah, which is right there as well, close to Lehigh. So that's pretty cool. Canastota, New York. We got David Lewis up there. And hey, as you come in, if you just tell us where you're from, that's it's kind of fun to help build the community that way. A lot of folks have been in here a lot, quite often, and others may just be joining us for the first time. We got Robin Jones from Malvern, Arkansas. We got Short Pants Bee Farm from the North Woods of Wisconsin. All over the place. We got
Scotland.
Keith Spillman here from the foothills of North Carolina. We got Marietta, Ohio. I knew there was a Marietta, Georgia. I didn't know there was an Ohio, Dayton,
Yep.
Ohio, and Hopewell. Is that in Ohio? Hopewell. Where's Hopewell at? Do you know?
Hopewell is, they're probably like right next to Craig because that's
Okay.
where,
I think that is right. Actually,
yeah,
you
yeah.
got Grayson here, Wildwoods Honeybee Farms. He's from Troy, Alabama. It's about an hour north of me here, and so wow, we got a good group, a good already in here. We got
They're
68 folks
spread
just in
all
the
around.
first few minutes. So yeah, it's kind of the Mariana, Florida. That is right about an hour south of here. That's awesome. Rock Creek Bees. I'm just up here in Dothan, as you probably already know. We got somebody
Everywhere.
from Scotland, Stuart
Yeah,
from Scotland, and man, this is awesome stuff.
yeah.
Welcome aboard, everybody. Glad to have you in here. Lisa's here from Ozark, Alabama, which is about, I think, as the bee flies, maybe a couple of miles from my bees in Ozark. So she's right here local. Um, and Lisa had a unique story. If you haven't seen her video, she went up and visited with Greg. She did a 3-part series. They had quite the adventure up there at Greg's place in Ohio a
Oh,
couple of weeks
yeah.
back. So that's pretty cool.
They had fun.
Um, wow, Arkansas, we got Marion, Indiana. As you come in, Aussie Beekeeping. We got Aussie. I was assuming for sure that's got to be from Australia. Ontario, Canada, California, Kansas, Western Kentucky. Wow, Michigan. Hey, thanks, Matt, for coming in. Matt actually, I think he actually put a question up or a comment tonight that we may address later. Central Ohio. So as people come in, guys, we appreciate you just kind of saying where you're from. I got Joy from Lancaster, Ohio. And of course, I'm from Southeast Alabama. And Brian, you're from the Cleveland area,
Nor-
right?
yep, Northeast Ohio. Yep.
All right, guys. Well, it certainly is awesome to have you guys in here already, folks. We welcome you wherever you're from, and as the comments come rolling in, sometimes we miss a few here or there, but we appreciate you being here. It's been a ongoing thing for really about a year and a half now, Brian, hasn't it?
Oh my gosh.
Been crazy.
Yeah.
Spirit of Toad, Southwest Georgia. He's from down in the, I think, Lake
Yeah.
Seminole area, just across the river over there.
Oh wow.
So Grimes, that's it. That's like literally maybe 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes from me right here. He's just around the corner, pretty much.
Ed.
So anyway, good old Ed.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a very busy time with the bees. Greg actually, he was going to try to join us from the grafting shack. He said he was going to try to show us what he was doing, but he couldn't get any Wi-Fi. So he's running a little bit behind. Hopefully he'll be on here in a little bit. He said he's going to transfer some cells and get on here as soon as he can, as soon as he gets some Wi-Fi. So he is running a little behind, but as you guys know, it is his career. It is how he feeds his family. And so he's got to put that in front of this live chat, and
Yeah.
he will be in here though. He's doing his best, but he is a super busy time of the year for him right now. It's I guess you guys are just really coming into the heart of your season right now, aren't you, Brian? Up there,
It is just it's pure madness
yeah.
up here. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'd like to take
Yeah.
just a couple of minutes here and kind of just talk a little bit about the stream team and kind of how we got this thing rolling. For those who may have joined us in the past, a few months, we really hasn't talked about this story much. So I thought we'd kind of review that real quick while folks are
Sure.
hopping on. And then we'll just start talking about bees a little bit here. But back, I guess it was what, what, November, December of 2022, about a year and a half ago. I don't remember. I had done like a live chat myself just back the previous May, about 2 years ago, and it just didn't really know what I was doing. And I thought it was kind of cool to do that. I'd seen Cayman doing his, and a guy was at Backyard Bees, North Carolina, O'Brien up there in North Carolina. He said, "You really need to look at Castle High. He does
Good
live
old
chats all
Brian.
the time." So Brian was like, so I said, well, finally, I'm like, well, I'm just going to check out Castle Hives. And I got into a live chat you were doing one night, Brian, and then I reached out to you, and you kind of showed me how to do
Yeah,
the chat, and we did a stream, and Greg. It's kind of interesting though, because independent of that, Greg reached out to me around that time, late November, early December, said, "Hey, I'm going to be at Hive Life. Are you coming?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Would you like to do a podcast with me when I'm there? Just check into our booth or whatever." And I said, "Sure." So, and the next thing I know, Brian's setting up a live chat with 6 or 7 people. We had Ian and Cayman, and we had all kinds of folks on there.
yeah.
And Greg was on there, and that's the first time I think I ever actually talked to Greg or met Greg.
Wow.
It was kind of cool. And then it went well, and so the next week we did it on my channel. I think right before Hive Life or something. I can't remember the
Yeah,
exact dates, but ended up having a good time, and we
yeah.
met
It
at Hive
was.
Life, hit it off, and then we just started the stream team thing up. Within a couple of weeks, we kind of named it, and then we just kind of started rolling. We've had a lot of guests on here. We've had a lot of fun. We've done some giveaways, but
Yeah.
we've kind of settled into a routine here where we try to do this pretty much every Wednesday night. We've missed just a few, but very few.
Mm.
And kind of the three of us discussing bees and talking bees with all you folks out there in the community, and having guests on occasionally. And it's just kind of gotten into a groove here. So we welcome you. I think there's a wealth of knowledge and information on here. I've learned a lot from folks out here in the chat, as well as both from you and Greg. Brian, it's been a great experience.
Yeah, it's been. I would not probably be where I'm at today with the knowledge that I have had it not been for this. Because I've learned, been able to learn so much just from, and from the both of you, but then from our guests that we've had on. It's been such an amazing opportunity to just sit and chat with, the guests that we've had on. I mean, it's just the heavy hitters in the beekeeping industry, but then the both of you also. I mean, you're both very humble individuals, that in some of Greg's words, he'll be like, "I'll stop it now," But and you though too, Bruce. I mean, you don't give yourself enough credit at times, But yeah, I
Mm.
mean, I've been fortunate enough to develop a friendship with the both of you, and I can honestly say that my beekeeping probably would not be where it's at had it not been for this.
Greg, we were just talking. Welcome aboard, Greg. Thanks for joining us. I was talking earlier about how you were in the grafting shack and just doing your best to get here, but it's that busy time of the year for you. So we've been talking a little bit about. I know there's some folks on here that may not have been, that may be kind of new. So we kind of talked about our story, how we got started with the stream team, and really that's kind of where we're at. Brian was just talking a little bit about what it's meant to him, and I don't know how much of that you heard, but it's a really cool. I think one thing that kind of sets us apart a little bit is we do get along. I mean, we're not, it's not dominated by any one of us. We all share our channels, and we just, I feel like the chemistry is pretty good here.
Yeah.
And we have 3 different levels of beekeeping as well: the hobbyist, the sideliner, and the commercial person. And so it just works. It's just been a lot of fun. But Greg, tell us what's going on with you, man.
Well, I was hoping to have. Hopefully, you can hear me okay.
We
It's
got you.
that
Yeah.
time of year where I think a lot of these bee chats are going to end up being somewhere here on the farm. I snuck into the shop where we do have our. What do you call that internet thing, Brian? I always forget the name of that thing. The satellite one.
Starlink or something.
Yeah,
That's it. Yep. We've got that here in the shop.
I was going to say Skynet.
I want to say I call it Tony Stark thing, but I think that's a different thing. But anyways, it's that time of year where it's just, like most farmers, you don't stop till, no earlier than dark 30, If you don't know what dark 30 is, that's 30 minutes after dark because you're just working until you can't see anymore. But matter of fact, I can remember a little funny story. Years ago, when we were first getting out to the farm, when we had a piece of ground to actually turn over and do something with, at the time, I traded an old farmer who was kind of in his golden years, kind of getting out from haying and all that kind of stuff. And he needed something he could kind of putz around in and get around, and I needed a tractor. And so we struck up a deal, and I traded him my King Quad 4-wheeler that we used to just take to the property and just tool around on. I traded him that for an old 1965 John Deere 3020. And anyway, so we brought that old tractor back, and the headlights didn't work. Well, it turns out old Mike's wife wouldn't let him have headlights on any tractors or any equipment because he would just run all night long doing stuff. So he wasn't allowed to have headlights on some of those old things.
Wow.
So anyways, when I think of dark 30, I was trying to remind myself, you've got to stop at some point, because otherwise you'll just keep going. And then when you're doing stuff in the dark, and it's late and you get tired, you make mistakes, things break. Whether it's beekeeping or anything else, you'll get into that moment where you make that first mistake and that just set you back, and you have to say, okay, that's enough. I got to stop for the night, because from here on out, it's just going to cost me time, money. I'm going to start breaking things. I'm going to get myself hurt. Is it really worth the push for whatever extra yield I'm going to get? So this time of year, a lot of the chats are going to probably come from the shop here, because it's still, like you can see in Brian's window there. There's still plenty of light. We've got another,
Oh yeah,
geez, man, hour and 40 minutes before it's too dark to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least an hour. So anyways,
Yeah.
I was out in the grafting shack. I was hoping that I would have had Wi-Fi out there, but I don't. And I'm in one of those situations, and I'm sure we'll get to it, where it doesn't matter how well you plan. It doesn't matter how well you do all the things. Stuff happens, and it really sets you back. And now you have to figure out how you're going to adapt and improvise through that. So I'm sure we'll get to that at some point tonight, but that's what I was doing out in the grafting shack, was trying to get ahead of, yet again, cells hatching before I had them in boxes. So I'm sure we'll talk about that more, but I enjoy being on here talking with you guys and sharing all the things that we do. And I appreciate your guys' not only unique perspective on beekeeping, but who you are uniquely as individuals. So I'm looking forward to chatting tonight with you guys about who knows what. I can't see. I'm coming in from my phone from the shop here. I can't see any comments. So if you have anything bad to say about Greg, now is definitely the time to do it, because I can't see a single thing.
Well, I did something a little unique this time, and I just kind of wanted to see if we could interact a little bit with our the folks in the community a little bit. So I posted on my community, if you have any questions for the chat tonight, just put it in there. So we've got a few questions that folks have sent in, and we'll get to some of those as we go along. But I'd like to kind of go around the table here and just kind of mention briefly kind of what's going on in your situation. I guess I'll start with me. I've been really concerned this year about the honey crop. We just didn't have a very good spring. We just almost very minimal privet. We had a little bit trickling. It was enough to keep the bees kind of alive and fairly strong, but they just weren't packing any away. And the tallow has hit pretty hard here now. I actually had not been down to Slocum since the day I did the last video, or the video down there when I checked on Big Red. It was the 29th of April. 29th of April, I went down there, and it is totally different now down there. Those boxes are packing out with honey. They're just crazy, stacking boxes up. And same thing out at Appleton Farms. It's a new place. They sell a lot of my honey, but I've got a few hives out there. And so I'm like, holy cow. It was yesterday afternoon. I went down there after work, got there about 7 and just checked in on them, 6:30 or 7 o'clock. And so late last night, I went up to the farm and picked up, I think, 24, 25 boxes. And then today I got off after lunch and went down and stacked boxes. But then I went up to the farm today to check the pollination bees, and we literally they're not bringing anything in. So there's nothing going on, no flow. The hives are anemic. They're decent, but they're not super strong. I think there's not a lot coming in. And so Still concerned about the honey crop. We're going to have some, but it's not going to be anything like what I need, I'm afraid. So we'll see what happens. But I know that I see David Lewis says location, location, location opposite here. And I know that last year we had a tremendous crop and other folks were struggling. So that's just how it goes, I think. And we'll just deal with what we have. I do think we're going to have a decent crop, but nothing like what I was kind of hoping we would have.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of where I'm at. That's what I've been doing. I had opportunity the day before Mother's Day to catch a fun swarm. It was hanging on a lawnmower at a local business here, and I've been trying to get that thing edited, have all kinds of footage for it. It's just taken me a while to get that done. And so as far as the YouTube thing goes, and anyway, that's kind of what's going on here. We're kind of in a holding pattern right now, just making sure they got space, kind of checking boxes, checking for dead outs, which I did have one here in the backyard, one of my apimays. I tried something that just did not work, and I ended up killing a hive, getting slimed out. So,
oh wow,
it was a laying worker colony, or I think it was actually a drone laying colony that had nothing in it, no drones or anything in it. Basically, it was just a few bees. But so I dropped a strong 7-frame apimay nuke in there. It's a swarm I caught up high in a tree. And I thought that would fix it. I dropped it right in the middle, but either they were too far gone or something happened, or maybe there were some hive beetle larvae or eggs in there, but went in a week later and it was slimed out with hive beetles. So I think the beetles it must have been laid up with eggs because it was weak before I even dropped them in there maybe.
Yeah.
And so I think they just pushed all the bees out, and there were really no dead bees. I think they just absconded, but that was a bummer because that was a beautiful swarm I dropped in there. So I was bummed about it. But
yeah,
you learn, win some, you lose some. And I should have probably just dumped all those bees out. And I could have dropped that nuke in there, but I should have probably dumped all the rest of the bees out from the other colony and taken all those frames out and just started afresh. But
yeah,
anyway, that's what's going on here. So we got honey coming in my really good, strong tallow production areas. And then we have very little coming in the production of the pollination bees. And we'll talk a little later about my strategies, I think, going into next year. I'm going to do things totally different as far as I'm not going to do pollination next year. I've kind of decided not to do that. And that allows me to plan to do things a little different and to kind of strategize better for both making bees and honey production next year. And I've got some ideas I'll kind of run by everybody a little bit later tonight as we talk about our future plans. So, Greg, tell us a little bit update on exactly what's going on at your place, kind of where you're at with everything, and then we'll go to Brian.
Sure. It's just in a fun way, trying to hang on. It's bee pandemonium. It's everything is just really starting to catch on. We had a setback with that cold and that rain. All the queens that were emerged that week either never came back or weren't a good quality queen. So we ended up going through and pinching, removing, dropping new cells, getting all that freshened up. So while that set us back on brood, those colonies just absolutely went to town on nectar and honey because the weather went from rain and cold to just beautiful, warm, sunny. Everything was just in bloom. And that can kind of be a problem for folks because everyone has been kind of in a real similar situation. I can't tell you how many calls I'm getting this week or folks stopping by the shop. And we're trying to sort through do they need a queen? What's their situation? They start talking me through it. And a lot of times, a lot of folks were struggling with that cold, wet snap that we had. If it was a queen expecting on a flight, they're non-existent. Now we're trying to play catch up in those kind of scenarios. So for us here, we're grafting on a schedule every week. We're grafting more than we need. So that's helping us get caught back up quickly. But we were on track for nukes to be able to leave here at the end of May. And then with that one 7 to 10 day setback, it's not just lights turn out, lights turn back on, and then you go again. When something like that happens in a pretty significant mating window, what you end up having is when you do refresh that and you do get the next round of queen in there, there's a sequence that it takes them to start and to go to build up to turn the lights on. They just don't turn it on and it's just full brood again. It's a little bit of a sequence. So unfortunately they put us back, at least 1 week. It's probably more like 10 to 14 days. So we hope to have some of the nukes coming out that first weekend in June. More than likely, they're going to roll out probably that weekend of June the 10th, and then that Father's Day weekend. And then we had some extra orders that came in a little bit later, add-on orders, and those are going to be ready like later on in June. So what we have here today is a day where I just delivered a bunch of equipment to some areas of Pennsylvania, northern Ohio, and then up into the northern part of Michigan, and then just got back today. And today's plan was to take all these or however many jesters we had built and go right out and then actually split the splits. They're just too fat with honey and pollen, so we were going to go out where we have a beautiful queen and everything's ready to go, kind of pull them into the jester box and then just kind of build them up over the next week or 10 days so they actually have room for brood to go home in those nukes. And we went to go do that, and I realized, oh man, I needed, for at least for the first round of nukes, if I'm pulling 5 frames out of those boxes, I got to put 5 frames back in. I mean, I could leave 3 frames, but I get in the habit of just putting all the frames back so I don't have a nasty frame mess at some point. So anyways, I needed at least 1,000 frames today to make sure to get everything framed back up and everything going. And, these are things you learn to kind of work through. And I was short on deep assembled frames with foundation. I thought that's no big deal. I've got, I think, 1,200 unassembled off to the side here. I've got cases of foundation. We'll knock it out real quick. Well, we go to assemble the frames, and they're all mediums. And I'm thinking,
Oh no,
gosh, what is going on? So all the frames that I was planning on assembling to throw out in the nukes, they're all mediums. So if I were to go do that, now I've got to put 5 frame medium boxes on top of everything. I got to build them. I got to dip them. I got to assemble the medium frames. I got to put in the fountain just to tie them over a little bit. So we're working on another plan right now. But in the meantime, those cells were supposed to have been dropping, this evening. Boom, 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 right? I pull the big nuke split out of that colony, and then I go right behind and drop the next queen. And there's no going back to look for queen cells or none of that. She's hatching out within 24 to 48 hours, depending on if I did it tonight or in the morning. And it's the most efficient way to do it. Well, that's not the plan. So now I'm back to the scenario I was in last week, where I'm going to have virgins hatching out, which is an absolute nightmare for me, because for me, virgins, I'm just calling virgins right now just happy little accidents, because I'm just trying to put on my Bob Ross wig, and here we are. We're just going to paint it. We're going to turn this into a beautiful. Here's a happy little trees and happy little queens and bees, right? And it is what it is. So of course we can work with virgins. It's for what we're doing is not ideal. A lot of extra steps. So what I was trying to show folks from the grafting shack is how we're taking all of our cell bars with the queen cells and the protectors, how to get them out of there, get them onto a hair roller, how to secure the hair roller. But the grand finale, what really sets this apart is putting honey, a little bit of honey right in the bottom of the hair roller. And I wanted to be able to just show off the absolute best honey to put in those hair rollers. And it was a modified jar of the one and only, the Dothan Shogun himself, honey from Bruce's Bees. So I had this whole thing set up, and I was going to be putting it. Well, there's no Wi-Fi out there. So long story short, I ran here to the shop to talk to you guys about whatever Bruce wants to talk about tonight. So anyways, that's kind of where we're at right now, is adapting, improvising. You put a plan together. You have everything lined up, and then you miscount, or you make a poor call, or the weather happens, or a timing thing. Well, you just have to work through it. You got to figure it out and kind of just go from there. So tomorrow now is going to be pull splits day. And then hopefully if I can get going early enough and at least get the first 90 or 100 out of the way, I can drop cells without having to worry about virgins. So We've got 208. We've got a whole skid of jesters that are just about assembled to go out for that. So we're having fun. We're trying to stay positive. I saw a great quote today on one of the farm pages, and it said something to the effect that the definition of farming is saying that we just need to get past this week and it'll get easier. And you say that every week until the day you die. That's what it feels like, because we're like, okay, we just got to get past this week, right? And then, okay, now it's going to get a little easier. And every week we find ourselves saying, we just have to get past this week. We just have to get past this week. But anyways, that's kind of what we're up to. Brian, what's going on in your neck of the woods?
Oh man, just busy. I think it's been pretty much every day. Now, if those, so a little disclaimer here, I'm not getting teary during the stream. This is that time of the year where my allergies say, here, we're going to make you miserable for about 3 weeks. So if you see these guys talking and then I'm going like this, I'm not like emotionally breaking down. So it's just allergy season. But it's just been busy. Sunday, I went and I spoke at a bee club, local bee club, and that was a great time. I went yesterday and helped. There was a school that I went down and spoke to, and the one teacher down there has had a hard time getting a mentor. So I told her, I said, well, I can cruise down and at least help you look at your colonies and kind of see where you were at. And it was a little bit of a mess. So got her 2 colonies situated. So I was figuring I was going to be about a half an hour helping her, and that turned into about an hour and a half. So, but got that situated. And up at my place, I still am fighting the queen issue. I went, let me see, was it yesterday? And went through the colonies that I had split and then I had installed the mated queens in. 2 of them have made queens and they looked beautiful. They're mated, they look good. So I wasn't worried about those, but I've got 6 of them that are, they're queenless. I did get in some virgin queens from Corey Stevens. So I was able to get, oh man, look at that, Bruce. I was able to get,
Here's my little buddy.
Oh man, look at
My
that.
daughter's just moving back here, so
Wow.
This is Lincoln. Look at right there. See? Say hello.
Hi.
Can you wave? This is Lincoln.
How old?
He is, I think, around 18 months old.
Oh my gosh.
But they are just moving back here. He's tired, so he's about to go to bed, I think. But they just let him run in here. And anyway, let me go hand him back to his mom. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Keep talking. Okay. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Now I got those queens put in those colonies today, and it was funny because after some time you learn how to read the colonies, and when there's, I say, you kind of know where there's homeostasis, and where that balance is, and everything's kind of hunky-dory and kosher. And I popped the lid on one of those queenless colonies, and it's just like there's the entire time. Yep. And when I put that cage down in there and I just got the frame situated where I wanted, I had to literally lean down and put my ear down to hear the buzz then. They had literally mellowed that much. You figure they've been queenless for probably 2, almost 3 weeks. They had cells, who knows what happened to the virgins. But I got that done. And then I actually, Greg, I've called you before on this, and I'm like, I got this situation going on and blah, 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 this and that, and whatever. And you're like, don't you have that resource, that double nuke? I'm like, yeah. So one of my queens from 2021 that I had moved over to a resource colony, I did a paper combine over on one of the colonies in the front. A colony that I had that pretty much both deeps were packed solid with nectar. They're queenless and just, they're harvesting. They're out they're probably going to give me a honey crop. I tore that whole colony down and just combined it with others. So I did, between the last 2 days, I've done a lot of work in the apiary. I'm still not done. I still have uh, two, no, one other colony that I need to go through and check. And if that colony, I don't find anything, I'm just going to the other side of that one resource that I had, moved the one queen out of. I'm just going to move that side over and just do another combine. I kind of was thinking about it, and after talking to you guys, and then I talked to Corey last night for a little bit just about those virgins. I'm not going to mess around with them anymore. It's just I need to get them situated so that I can get a honey crop. It's too many colonies for someone at my level. There's too many colonies that I'm messing around with and having to worry about, and it's just
it's aggravating.
it is. So, but I think I kind of hit I hit one of those roadblocks, and I was almost discouraged to even just go look. What happened, and it really kind of just it was a pretty good blow that I didn't expect, didn't know how to handle it, but I got pretty good control of it now. So it's just some work, and it'll work itself out. It's going to be good. I think I got it. I think I got everything moving in the right direction now. So, but it's good. I mean, I don't have 20 colonies, 21 colonies. There'll be 18. So it's manageable. It's manageable for me.
Well, that's beekeeping, and it's been a really crazy year down here. I mean, I've seen more drone layers and that type of situation this year than I've seen, I think, in the other 10 years combined. It's just been crazy. I'd like to take a moment here and recognize we got David Lewis. Thanks for the super chat. Grammy, thanks for the super chat. Greg, I'm trying to use my technology here. Grammy, and then I would also like to recognize, Matt F. Matt is the one that won the extractor last year from us, I believe.
Furno. He's been near the shop. Yeah.
And
Indiana.
but he had a question or a concern. What I did, for those who are just hopping on, I actually did a community post where I guess Brian's going to share it here. Did a community post where I just said if people want to ask questions, they can. And this is Matt's comment/question for us. And so anyway, I appreciate those super chats, guys. But let's go ahead and find it.
His question on here is: my luck ran out Tuesday. Took one sting to the leg and wound up in the ER. After hundreds of stings in my life with no major issues, now I have to live in fear. Any information about beekeeping and being allergic to stings would be appreciated. Don't want to give up beekeeping. I already have an appointment set up to look into immunotherapy. That's tough.
That's man, Matt. I hate for that for you. I got to meet Matt and his son when they came out here to pick up an extractor. I think that kind of thing could happen to just about any single one of us. Exactly what the catalyst is that switches our body from being able to take hundreds of stings a week or a day, and all of a sudden one turns it upside down. I have no idea, why that is, but I can say it's more common than you think. That's actually how we got into beekeeping. I know we've told that story before, but we were speaking at a homesteading workshop, and a fella came up, and because we were talking about raising pigs in the woods, and he wanted to trade a side of pork for all his equipment, because him and his son at the same time both developed extremely dangerous allergies. Now, I'm not talking about it's just uncomfortable and itchy, like send them to the hospital. Both of them kind of a situation, and they had been beekeeping together for years. So that's a terrible thing for that to happen. I know there are folks, I'm trying to think. The only person that I know who I think successfully has gone through immunotherapy, you might look, hopefully she won't care if I throw her name out of here. I know she was public with it, but her name is Kelly Burns, Burns and the Bees. Her and her husband are down in around the Smoky Mountain area. Look, they're on Facebook, Burns and the Bees. Maybe shoot them a message and just say, hey, Greg Burns thought he remembered you going through immunotherapy. Do you have any direction on that? Just point me in the right direction. I don't think she'd mind. If she does, I'm sorry, but I think trying to get a hold of somebody who's actually gone through it versus rather than trying to sort through all of the Google foods and all of the opinions and all of the, well, I heard through my brother, sister, second cousin's grandpa that, you know what I mean? So try to reach out to somebody who's gone through it, and hopefully, you can get shored up. I have heard of some folks being able to get it switched back around to where they can eventually start to take stings again. So Matt, we'll definitely keep you in our thoughts and prayers, and hopefully you can get this thing switched around. You can get back out there and get in the bees without being afraid.
Yeah, I've heard, of people being successful at that. I think it's quite a process to go through over time. Like it takes several months, if not a year, to do that. I guess I don't know what the protocol is, but I know people can go through a process, and hopefully it'll work out for you. So anyway, but we appreciate the super chat there, Matt, and I feel like I go ahead and pull your question up first. Also have let's see, another question here from Glade Sessions, particularly about Greg and your buckets. Let me pull this up here. Greg, how do you keep your buckets from leaking all over the place after a year or two of use? And how do you keep them from getting all the black mold and slime inside of them?
I'm not sure what the leaking all over the place is. Usually the leaking all over the place has more to do with how clean your plugs are or how clean your lid is, getting it sealed. If you're getting buckets that are getting funky and gross on the inside, there could be a chance that those lids aren't sealing because they've got too much growth around them. One thing I would recommend doing is if you bought buckets from us, we've stopped using the gasket lids years ago because you couldn't clean the buckets. We've switched over to just the regular pail lid. You can peel those things off. You can clean them. You can put them back. Buckets have a finite shelf life, though. They are not going to last, 5, 6, 7 years out in the field, primarily because they're exposed to UV constantly. I can say probably some of the oldest buckets that we have in use that are still working with no issues are probably 3 years old right now. Everything a little bit older than that eventually either cracks or has problems. And I think if I was more responsible with them, it wouldn't be quite big of an issue. But a lot of them get left outside, or as we're collecting them, we're just chucking them into a tote on the back of a truck. And I think when for us, the biggest fail point for them is when they're just stacked up outside and during the wintertime when it rains and it freezes and it gets ice. When the freeze, the thaw, the freeze, the thaw, if they're left out like that is a problem. All the ones that are under roof for the weathers, no problem at all. At this point in time, we've probably, I don't know, I'm not sure if I can put a number on the gallons that we've ran through buckets. Thousands of gallons of feed through buckets, and very rarely is there ever an issue that's actually equipment related. More of the times it's beekeeper related. They didn't get it seeded right. If you're making your buckets yourself, there's a lot of things you have to do right, including the hole, the size holes in the plugs, but the size of the hole that's in the lid too. Any deviation can make a difference. Other than that, the only times that you're really going to see them leak is if you're using black buckets. Those can be extremely problematic because they go from cool to hot so quick that those can puke out a little bit of feed. And then, of course, in the wintertime, while we can use the buckets in the wintertime, December, January, on days where it's above 50, we can turn that bucket, and give them some ProSweet thick feed. I'm not feeding 1-to-1 or 2-to-1, it's a 3-to-1. We can give them a very heavy feed just so they can subsist through their day-to-day, going to the bathroom, coming back, chores on those warm days. And then when it's cold, when it starts to cool off, then we can flip that bucket up. We only do that on colonies that really need it. And this winter, we didn't have to do it at all. So we don't even need to do those kind of emergency winter feedings with a bucket, because the Hive Alive fondant has taken that place, and that is the fondant is a way better solution than using a bucket. If you use a bucket feeder in the wintertime and you don't flip it over, you forget, you leave it on, you will 100% drown your bees when it gets too cold, because it'll lose vacuum, and that's a terrible thing to happen too. So if you have any specific concerns or experiences with your buckets, just shoot me an email at naturesimagefarm@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to troubleshoot with you and see maybe what the thing actually is. A lot of times we'll get a call from folks when we ship buckets out. They'll get them, they'll put water right into the kitchen sink in it, and then they'll put a blank plug in there that doesn't have any holes. And then they'll flip it over, and they're wondering, why is water coming out from the back side of the plug? There's no way for it to actually catch vacuum and do what it's supposed to do. And then so when you switch the plugs out to one that has a 2-hole or one that has a 3-hole and flip it over, even water will eventually catch the vacuum. I would say probably we're probably overdue for a bucket feeder part 2 video. We were the first ones to put a bucket feeder video out that I had ever seen, and that was many years ago. A lot has changed, but the components and how we use it really hasn't. So I hope that helps.
Appreciate the super sticker, Catherine. It really helps. Anyone who's able to do that, it really helps out both the channel and the stream team, what we're doing here. I'm hoping to be able to figure out some prizes in the future. I've got some ideas I've been working on in my mind, and so maybe we can get back to doing that a little bit here in the future. So another question I'd like to bring up here, I think, and I think we have 15 questions in the comments of that post I put on my community. We may not get to all of them, so if we don't, I apologize. But
that was a good job, Bruce. That was a good way to go about that.
I'm going to try. This one is, I'm going to see if I can put this. Oh, if I can. There we go. I'm going to try and copy and paste it in the comments and tell you who it's from. Wait a minute. I'm not sure how it's going to work. Honey and
Brian,
the coop.
Why Bruce is figuring that out.
Yeah.
This is going to show my age, and I'm a little younger than you, but I wasn't planning on having a skid of gesture boxes right behind here. But I swear, every time I look at that, you know what I see?
What?
I see, what's that stuff called? The Kool-Aid punch guy. All I can see him is just blasting through that like it's a brick wall and jumping out in front. He had some kind of saying or something.
My gosh, what is his name? Big old red thing.
That's it.
That would almost be like the ending of the stream tonight if you just kind of, your screen goes black and then it reappears and you're busting through all those boxes.
You know how much trouble I would get in? Like that one that's all the way up here. You know how tall that is? Susie somehow managed to put all those together and then stack that one up there. Like, I don't know how she did that, to be honest.
I mean,
hey, there she is. Hey, Susie, come here for a sec.
It's only the three of us.
Question for you.
It's only the three of us here.
It's just me, Bruce, and Brian. Just come here. Just come here.
Yeah.
Okay, look. All right, say hi. There's my better half, Susie. If you haven't met her, we were just talking about you because we were talking about. I keep looking at this. Everything's backwards. This stack of nuke boxes, and I keep seeing the Hawaiian punch guy going to bust through there and knock them all down.
Yeah.
So would you just do us a favor and just stand right there? This is not a joke. Okay, now put your hand up as high as you can.
Wow.
How'd you get that top box up there? It doesn't make sense.
That was Jake.
Oh, Jake did it. Well, okay.
Can't do that one.
He just barely got it. Okay. All right. Unsolved mysteries.
That was the last row.
Okay.
Hey, while we have the famous Susie here, we need an update on Susie's top bar hive.
It's going crazy. It's gone crazy.
See?
It's really full. So
That thing started to swarm one day. I thought it was
Did it?
swarming, and I turned the dial, and then all of a sudden you had all these drones that couldn't get in. They're just pegging the front door, trying to get in. It was like 8:30 at night. I decided I'm just going to get in there and see. I went through every single one of those frames and even split it because there's a solid follower board, and I've got two entrances. So I was going to just move the queen over to be safe. I moved her over, had everything split. I finally get through all the frames. Not only was there no queen cell, there was not even a cup anywhere.
What?
And they all decided they were just all going to. So I said, okay, forget it. I put everything back together, left it the same way. And I said, if you guys swarm, then great. It'll just be a part of. Susie couldn't be happier to see those
Yeah.
bees disappear out of that hive, but they're still there.
Uh,
Anyways, Bruce, did you figure out your
I'm
questions?
working on. I'm getting here. Let's see.
he's getting it.
Well,
I'm trying.
what
It was
Susie's
too
doing is
long. It was too
she's
long.
takes
So
2 long ones.
it
Yeah.
was
Well,
too.
Brian, one thing I wanted to mention to you while Bruce is pulling that up is you were mentioning, going from 21 to 18. I just wanted to throw this out there, and I don't want to sound too sappy, right? But the quality of the beekeeper isn't determined by the number
Oh
of
yeah.
colonies he keeps. It's the quality of the colonies that he
Yeah.
keeps. So,
And
sometimes we have a way, the scale has a way of determining itself for us,
yeah.
not because you can't handle more than 18, but sometimes you got to believe that God's got a plan. There's a plan in place. Something else is meant to
Yeah.
be, and you're at 18 for a reason. And so don't beat yourself up if you're
Yeah.
thinking, well, I failed, or I
Oh,
did
I know.
this, or this is
Yeah,
a
I know.
measure of my
And
beekeepingness, or
I may end up dropping a couple other colonies just because, like today, just when I'm getting ready to suit up and walk out there, and this has never happened before. I've had this will be the 7th year that I've had colonies at my mom's there, and I think it's drawing attention just with the number of them now, because this is the second time in a week that somebody has stopped while I've been there and they walk down and ask questions. The guy that came tonight, he was actually like a plumber, was in his work truck, and he come walking down and he said, oh, thank God you're not all suited up. He said, I drove past yesterday and I was almost going to stop, but I saw you were all suited up. And he said, I'm not going to bother a beekeeper when they're suited up. And, and he's
Just
he wants to get into it. He bought a couple, like startup beekeeping, like the hives and all that from Amazon, other than he has no clue where to get the bees. He said,
there you go.
I've heard of these newt things and, I've
element
heard of
new.
packages. And so what I might do, I got his contact info. I have that other resource colony that is
Yeah.
booming both sides. And
Yeah.
I said, how many hives do you want to start with? And he said, well, 1. And I said, well, think 1 is none. I said, start with 2. And I explained to him why. So I'm going to get in touch with him, and
Awesome.
I might just have him invite him over and just go through an inspection
Yeah.
on them, just to show him, hey, here's what they're doing, point out
Yeah.
this and that and whatever, and then help him get set up. He's like 3 minutes up the street from my mom's place, so it's close enough that when I go over, I
Sure.
can work him through an inspection, and then we could transfer 2 colonies up. But I might, just to help somebody else get started. I still have enough colonies for myself that it's really not going to affect anything on my end.
Right.
It's just I'm helping someone else get started. So it
That's
all,
awesome.
like you said, yeah, it all comes around. I mean, it's good though. It's good.
Yeah.
So
Hey, I see Brian or Jason from Bohemian Bees just checked in. He was on Grayson's Wildwood
Monday.
Bee Ranch Monday night, and that was kind of a neat
He did a good job.
chat.
Yeah.
Wildwood
Good job,
Honeybee
Jason and
Farms
Grayson.
with Grayson. So if y'all get a chance to go back and watch that, I know Grayson would appreciate it. There was some really good stuff there. Let's see if we can get into this question here. Now it was too long to put up just in the comments here on the live chat, so I broke into 3. So let's just we got a list. If we need to go through it again, we can. First, here's the first part of the comment. Hunting the Coop said, I'm having some issues with queens this season. I've got 10 coming from Nature's Image Farm in June. What's the best practice in y'all's opinion on making splits this late for good acceptance? I'm not killing my current queens, but I do want these new ones to get the best end of the deal. I'm located in South Carolina for reference of where I am in my season.
Huh.
Sounds like they want to make some splits a little bit late in the year, Greg. They're using your queens, and they want to know what the best way to do that is.
This late, I'd have to look and pull the order and see when the queens were. They're probably, I know they're not not going to be May, so they're probably June queens, probably
Yeah.
the end of June. So depending on where they are in the country,
South Carolina.
South Carolina. So I don't know what late what they
She
mean by
said
late.
she said June. They've got them coming in June. 10
Okay.
queens in South
Okay.
Carolina. I don't know if
Awesome.
that's early or late, but
Okay. Well, first, thanks for the queen order. We can't thank you enough. We appreciate you and trusting the genetics of your apiary with us and what we do. I can't say it enough. We really appreciate and love that you thought of us for that, and we're excited to have a piece of our farm go to you to be a piece of yours. There are so many different ways to make the splits, and sometimes, while there might be the best way, what you or sometimes look at is you look at the best way at the time. So depending on what your goals are in your apiary, how those colonies are being used kind of dictates maybe how you would make that split. In an ideal situation, you would have for the greatest acceptance, in my mind, something like a 5-frame nuke that has primarily young bees in it that have been queenless for enough time where you'll see them start to form queen cells to go in there, dig through those, and cut all those down. I mean, no matter what you do, it is just so easy to have her accepted right in the JZBZ cage. A lot of folks are buying queens from us as breeder stock, not only for their apiary, but they're grafting from our stock to make queens to sell, to make queens to put into their nukes, or just to have in their apiary to diversify their genetics. So I think what a lot of folks are going to be doing is making push-in cages to put those queens in, so they make sure that they are golden. And in that situation, the queen could go into a push-in cage over top of some sealed brood, let her run around and do her thing, and as the nurse bees emerge, that's their mama, right? That's going to be an immediate acceptance. Personally, I don't know that I would go through all of that unless you have some feisty bees and they just are having problems taking queens. Um, where it gets the most challenging introducing queens, and a couple things that I would shy away from is I would not try to requeen a double or a triple deep colony that you've just pulled a queen from. Even if you let them go queenless, the chances of you catching every single one of those cells, even if you shake the bees off, it's unlikely. Those rascals will just hide so many if you're in that kind of a situation. Um, so that can be maybe sometimes a little bit problematic. I would definitely encourage you not to even attempt to use one of these mated queens to requeen or to attempt to requeen a laying worker situation. Hopefully you're not in that boat either. Hopefully you have something that you're looking at where you've got some strong, healthy colonies. If you're talking about it being late, you probably have already pulled, some honey off of them. And if that's the case, I would just go ahead and make the split. I would probably take, in those situations, probably the easiest thing to do, depending on, and again, there's so many factors depending on the size of the colony. I'll tell you one thing that I do here almost every single day when I'm making splits, no matter the size of the colony. For me, what works best is if I just move the queen and the colony to a new spot in the yard. It could be a box over, it could be a stand behind, it could be on a pallet one way or the other, and then just leave everybody else at home, and then just leave only a few frames there, and primarily all sealed or young nurse bees. Yeah, you're going to have the field force. It is going to fly back and populate that box, but let them go queenless for 3 to 5 days. Cut the queen cells down, add the mated queen. I mean, that you're looking at a situation there where that's really high acceptance. You could also do the opposite. You could make your split and err on the heavy side. And this also works really well because it accomplishes two things. Number one, you are kind of locking in where you want this box to be for that time period. And secondly, you're getting rid of all of the field force. Is you could actually just make that split on the extreme heavy side, get into 3 to 4 frames of sealed brood, 3 to 4 frames of resources, and then just some fresh drawn comb. Just move that to the new spot, knowing that you're going to lose some of the field force. You just want to make sure you have enough nurse bees on the sealed brood just to maintain that heat inside of that colony. Even if you did it into a 5-frame box and you shoot for 2 frames of sealed brood, one frame of food, and then another half a frame of food and brood, and then that fresh sheet of foundation in there. Move that, knowing you might lose 30% due to the field force that are going to go back home. Now in that box, you're going to be primarily left with just nurse bees. Okay. In that situation there, you install that, they've been queenless, let's say at least 1 day, minimum 1 day. But let's say you're in that 3 to 5 day range. It's easy to go back into a 5-frame box, look for queen cells, cut them down, add the mated queen. In 4 days, go back, make sure she's out. If she's not out, let her out. She's going to be laying within, depending on your weather, how much pollen and things are in the colony, she's going to be usually laying within that first week. By the time she kicks in and starts to lay, the nurse bees that were a little younger on the frame are going to start aging into the time frame where they're going to start being foragers. And then the seal brood is going to start hatching. So you're going to have a pretty cohesive unit all in one with young nurse bees. That's a really easy way to do it. You could get into lots of other methods, like using a double screen board, which would also be a beautiful way to do it, an easy way to make the splits. But what I just mentioned earlier, I can't even tell you how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of splits we made, even in the same bee yard, just by understanding that if we move the queen and a support staff, a lot of them are going to lock in and stay with the queen, other than the foragers that are out, and they're going to repopulate that original located box. So keep that in mind too. As long as you let them go queenless for a little bit of time and cut the cell down, I mean, your acceptance rates are going to go boom, 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 and you're going to be up into the 80, 90% take rates. If you have any questions, you want to talk about it more and talk to me about exactly what your configurations are, how big they are, what your goals are for them. Just you have on that email with your orders, my number. Just give me a call on my cell phone. We'll talk it out and make sure that you have all the information that you need to make the best choice on making those splits in preparation for those queens.
Greg, I'm going to piggyback a question on that, because after looking through some of my stuff this afternoon, especially some of the pollination bees, though some of them seem pretty strong, I'm thinking about just kind of breaking them down, replacing a bunch of queens if they're weak at all, but it's going to be later in the summer after when I get a chance, like maybe July, August, even maybe September, if I can get post solstice queens, I want to try and do that. I'm not sure. And we can talk about that later, but in that case, if you're just trying to do some summer splits after a flow, I guess the best thing to do is break them down and feed them. We just say, kind of go ahead and feed them during the process, make sure they're happy. And because I guess if they're angry, if they're trying to rob, it's probably going to be a little bit more difficult to have them accept those queens. Would you agree with that? That's kind of what you were saying, I think.
If they're grumpy for any reason, I mean, they can just, you would hope they wouldn't take it out on the queen, but grumpy bees are grumpy bees. And so if we can keep them just fat and healthy and happy, and just, they've got everything they need other than the future egg layer, to me, it just, but that's where kind of what we do is when our focus is on nukes and queens, like we always have feed on them. It's either a bucket feeder, it's an in-frame feeder, and we're using pollen patties throughout nearly the entire year just to make sure they have just enough, so we don't go into this mode where they start to get a little bit grumpy, start to starve, because when you start making splits and you're making nukes or you're making queens, the later in the year you get, the more difficult your take rate is, for lots of different reasons. But if you are making those splits in the same yard, if you're raising queens in your main apiary along with big hives, and you get into a part of dearth, I mean, those little rascals are just absolute targets to get robbed out, and they can get absolutely decimated in just an hour. So if you can keep everybody, not only keep your splits fed and happy, but even your larger production colonies, if you get into a dearth, and you've got your supers off and you're done, man, just make sure you've got feed on them, just so they hopefully stay out of those smaller colonies.
Hey, Greg, let's piggyback one more time on feeding your bees. Feeding bees, and when you're looking at cost financially and so forth, I haven't done a lot of feeding in the summertime in the past. I've just tried to kind of make sure they have weight and just kind of let them do their thing. I know I've lost some colonies probably due to robbing the weaker colonies. How do you justify for someone who is not selling bees, who's mainly a honey producer, how is it as far as affordability? What do you recommend people do? Do you recommend they constantly feed them at that time, or just make sure they have weight on the hives? Or, obviously you're making bees, you're selling bees, you're trying to keep them in growth mode as much as possible. For those people who are mainly focused on honey, or maybe hobbyists or small sideliners, kind of like myself, what would be your recommendation there to make sure you're just not in the red all the time financially?
Yeah.
Because
Well,
that food can
that's
be
a good,
expensive.
it's a great question, but there's a lot of other little factors there. When we get into, let's start with why we're feeding here. We're feeding here. Um, Not even like right now I have very little feed on anything because they're not taking it. We have such
Sure.
a heavy flow on right now. It's a wasted effort. And it's to mitigate any risk or loss. There's no sense putting the feed on there right now until we get a little bit of a lull in what's coming in, and then we'll make sure we have it on. For us or for anybody, that's where the different types of feed and the different types of feeders, I think, really come into play. If you were, talking about a point in dearth where the bees have stores, right, and they're starting to use it all, I don't know that putting them in a gorging situation is necessarily what you might want to do. But if we're trying to keep them just pacified to where they're getting that stimulation, that there is enough feed coming in, they don't have to get grumpy and start to rob, they've got enough inside of the colony. In those situations there, you're putting feed on just so they can cruise to that next flow point, right? Unless you don't have a flow point. If you don't have a point in time in the future where you're expecting a flow and they're light, okay, now you have to balance out two things. How hungry can I let these bees get? And is there any feed going to come in later? You get into situations where you have no idea either one of those things. If your colonies are light because you just pulled all their honey, you're going to have to feed. If you don't feed, you're going to set them up for a lot of failure throughout the rest of the season. So when we're feeding, we're not putting feed on and getting like an overabundance or an extra yield out of anything. We're feeding because we're making splits. We're putting them in situations where they either don't have the field force, they don't have the numbers of the field force to go gather. We're also wanting them to constantly draw foundation all the way up until September. And the best way that we have found to do that is with the bucket feeders, with just that trickle effect above, because we can get those colonies to constantly draw comb. That's important for us when we're making queens, because we're always putting fresh frames in to get that fresh white wax to be able to find the eggs, have that fresh brood, have those fresh frames within our operation. So we're feeding for their different reasons, but we have a reason why we're doing it. So you have to understand, why would I even be feeding at all? And then once you understand why you would be feeding, how to go about it is a little bit different. But you're not just putting feed on there and wasting money for no reason. You've got to have a reason to put the feed on there.
Yeah. Great stuff.
What Greg said right there, it's one of the things that when I was speaking on Sunday, that's one of the things that I brought up. And I was just talking about, basically being proactive versus reactive. And, I was just talking about feeding and just some of the things that I do. And I told them, I said, with that club, they're very active on Facebook and things like that. So I told the people, I said, you need to really step back before you're doing these things and understand the why.
Mm-hmm.
And not because, well, so-and-so did it in the Facebook
video.
group,
Or
or on a video. You need to understand why you're doing it. Is there a reason why your colonies need it? And there were quite a number of people that came up afterwards that were like, you brought up some pretty good points. And like the one lady, she said, I've been keeping bees for 12 years. And she said, I pretty much, from hearing you talk, she said, I think I'm not a beekeeper. I'm like a bee haver. Because she said, I react to everything that I see in the Facebook group. And if other people are doing it, I just go out and I do that. So that's a good point. I mean, understanding the why.
Great job, Brian. Getting folks to understand why that we have tried to, not only with beekeeping, but when we're helping and mentoring folks through raising chickens or raising cows or raising pigs. If you don't start with the why, you are going down a road of it'll just be a wreck of misery, because you can't control the vehicle that you're in going down the road, because you don't even know what the parameters, you don't even know where the navigational beakers are.
Yeah.
That's kind of a problem with feed. If you just look at like what is feed, okay? Like if we just go, let's go back to the flower. What is feed? I like to make folks like think about it and go all the way through. Like, okay, what's honey? Okay, yeah, it's amino acids and it's a bee process and it comes from nectar. Well, what's nectar? We ask the kids this when we do talks at schools. Well, what is nectar? And somebody will throw out the answer. Well, it's photosynthesis. It's sun and it's water. Without sun, we're all dead. We don't exist. Without water, we're all dead. We don't exist. But when I look at a jar of honey, I like to look at that as I am looking at an edible version of the sun. The most purest, most beautiful energy that God has ever given us is right there in that honey, and it goes all the way back to the sun. Well, what do the bees do with all that? Well, it's not just they're not going through Dairy Queen and getting a peanut butter parfait, and they're just out there enjoying this flower and that flower, and hey, like they're using that for roles and tasks inside the colony. First and foremost, it's a carbohydrate, and that carbohydrate, yes, it helps them nutritionally to give them the energy to do those jobs, right? But a lot of the work of nectar, but more importantly, feed, is to give them the different sources of sugar, so we can stimulate and get them to actually produce wax from their platelets. That's important, because if they're not being stimulated with the carbohydrates, they're not able to push the wax platelets out. Their bodies just can't do it. So if we're in a situation where we're making splits, or we're just adding boxes for supers, we need them to draw out that comb first and foremost. The longer we get through the year, when there's less of a flow on, the more challenging it can be to get them to draw that foundation out. So the why to feed in a lot of cases is we need to keep drawing comb, so they actually have a place to store the pollen, the nectar, and for mama to lay the eggs. If we go through this mental thing where it's bees live in nature, and no one's feeding the bees, so why should I be feeding them? You can totally do that, but you have to be ready and accept
results,
the consequence for that.
Yep.
There's a lot to why feed. Whether it's you're pulling all of their honey and they don't have anything left, you got to give them something. Or it's we're stimulating the wax glands, so they're drawing foundation to have a place to put the pollen, the nectar, evaporate it, make it into honey, but more importantly, have a place to lay the eggs for that future generation.
Good stuff. I want to do one more splitting question, then we'll move on to some other stuff. But I wanted to take just a moment and comment on everyone that's joined us. We're up to 176 right now. Appreciate if you hit that like button if you could. But we, I haven't recognized everybody in here, and there's no way we possibly can. But just thanks for being on the call here, on the video, on the chat, and for commenting. Or if not, you're not commenting, just thanks for watching and checking in with us tonight. We did want to do a quick one more splitting question. I think it'll be a pretty quick answer here from David Lewis, talking about splitting double deeps. And here's the question. David Lewis says, I'm thinking about splitting my double deeps after the honey extraction. Would you suggest a queen excluder between the deeps for a week before splitting the deeps? So if you're going to split a double deep colony, how would you do it?
Brian, how would you split a double deep?
So, question is, are you going to let them raise the queen, or do you have queens? If you're just going to let them raise a queen, I mean, you could do the old trusty split where
walkaway split.
Yeah. I mean, you could shake them all down to one box, put a queen excluder in between them, and then nurse bees and everything else are going to move up to take care of that brood. You just move it. You know where your queen is. You have that other box with, really everything that you need in it. It's just an easy way. And I mean, you could do that. And then introduce a mated queen. You could let them raise a queen. And David, I forget where you were at. I
believe David, aren't you in New York? Isn't David in New York? I'm not sure.
So the season is probably a couple weeks shorter than ours. Well, it depends on the area in New York. But yeah, I mean, it just all depends if you want them to raise the queens or central New York. Yeah, there you go. Um, I like things easy. So for me, I like to get mated queens and just go about it that way. And you're basically cutting out those couple weeks that you have to let them make a queen. Um, I want to ask though, so you're thinking about splitting your double deeps after your honey extraction. Is there a reason? Like, do you want to boost your numbers? Like, why would you want to split them after you extract? I'm
Yeah,
just curious there too.
my guess would be he wants to maximize the honey flow and then expand for next year is what I would guess,
Yeah,
probably. Because if you split them off now and then during that middle of honey flow, then you're going to decrease your, you're going to make
yeah.
them work harder. But anyway, Greg, what do you think about that? If you're going to split a double
Well,
deep, how would you do it?
I think the important thing to keep in mind here is I'm having a hard time seeing the questions, but it looks like David Lewis. He looks familiar, like we probably met at Hive Life. So if so, thanks for the question.
He
If
knows.
not, thanks for the question too. But it's always fun to see someone you've met or shook their hand before. The question is, I'm thinking about splitting my double deeps after the honey extract. Would you
Yeah,
suggest a queen excluder between the deeps for a week before splitting the deeps? I tell you what I would do is, assuming he's in an area where he's not capturing a fall flow, he's got his summer flow. If he is, Brian, I think you think he's up in the New York area.
Central
yeah.
New York.
Central New
It is.
York.
So if it's after his honey, sometimes they do get goldenrod up there. But let's just say he's not going after a fall flow, and he's going to be somewhere. If we're spinning here, the early July, let's just say he's right around July 4th or mid July. I tell you where there's an incredible opportunity there is what I would do is to try to sort through 20 frames that you've just pulled supers from. You're going to have so many bees in there. Trying to find the queen and sort through the frames and do this and do that is going to be it's going to take a little bit of time. And if you don't have the time, I tell you what I would do is I would just put a queen excluder between the two. I'd probably come back 5 to 7 days later, and then you would know exactly where the queen's at and where the queen's not. And then wherever the queen's not, move that box. And then I would try to get lined up on a mated queen to where you can have a queen in that window, know when she's going to ship, and then go ahead and make that move. And even if it's only like 3 to 5 days, that's plenty of time. Put that excluder in, let them start to make whatever box is making cells. They don't have the queen. You know which box to move to go to or fro, cut all the cells down. Now you know which box you're going to add the mated queen to. Now you're only adding a queen to a single deep. It's not like you're trying to get a double deep to now take this new queen. It's just one single box. Now you could do a couple things. So now, if you did just slip it in there, come back quick, see which one has cells. Okay, this one, cool, knock the queen cells down, shake all the frames off. Look, one thing to keep in mind is depending on where those boxes were, you might be in a situation where it's all honey up there, or it's mostly honey in that deep. For me, I kind of, maybe I'm too facetious sometimes, but I like to make sure that I've got the next generation of bees happening in that box, so there's not a lull in time where they're vulnerable. So I would probably go in and make sure, even if I have to rob it out of the other colony and just shake those bees off, give it a firm shake, go into the mother colony where the brood probably is, grab you, several 2-3 frames of sealed brood and just give it a gentle shake, right? And the foragers fly off. All the adhering bees are typically those younger bees. Move all those frames of sealed brood now up into that top box. Go move them somewhere, right? Put the other frames back down for mama below. To me, that is like the easiest thing to do. But what I am guilty of doing, and when I'm looking at something like that, I have to hold myself back. Hopefully Susie's out in the yard with me and she's reining me in, because in that situation there, what I would try to do is find the queen and go make a 3-frame split and put her somewhere else, and then absolutely tear through that entire colony and split them all into 5-frame nukes. That's what I do, but I'm working on growing numbers because I know in July and August, man, you already have enough material for me, I already have enough material in a 5-frame nuke to get it through the winter if they're clean. So that's the more heavier way to split them.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I think, man, the comments are coming in so fast here, but I think Jason from Bohemia Bees talked about splitting in 4 ways, and then you have insurance through winter. Really, after a honey flow, I don't know that it's super important to have these great big huge colonies. To me, I used to always have the philosophy that you wanted to do your splits in the spring and then just keep the strong colonies through summer into fall and into winter. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you take a nuke through winter in the springtime, that thing's going to blow up into a production colony with no trouble. And so if you can kind of do that, and it really depends on what your goals are. I mean, if you want to grow numbers, that's one way to do it. And if a couple of them, if you do lose some of them or whatever, then you want to use them for resource hives, you can do that as well. And one thing, if you split your colonies and introduce new queens, kind of at whatever time of the year, but especially later in the year, you can actually, if you want to really develop your genetics, you can look at those colonies and you can see which of those new queens are the best ones, and you can actually kind of recombine. You can really improve your stock. You can cull out the bad ones and really have really stronger stock going through. If you want to do that, that's what some people are kind of ruthless with that. They go through and they really look at their queens, and they start off with a ton of splits and a ton of colonies, and they actually whittle them down by the end of the year, and they have nothing but super strong stock because they've kind of culled out the bad or the weaker of the genetics.
Right.
So that's another thought, another reason
perfect.
To do it.
The time of the year, I mean, that's a beautiful scenario, right? Because let's say you get in there after your flow, right, and you split them out, or even before you split them out. Here, one thing to also consider is, depending on your temperatures, and after your flow, man, do a mite wash, see where you're at. If you're like really clean, you don't need to do anything heavy, just you're golden. If you're at that threshold where, I probably need to treat. Depending on what your temperatures are, you would maybe choose Formic, you choose Apogard. Put them through a round of treatment first, right? Because if you have a queen that's already on the fritz or she's on the way out the door and you lose her, it's really not a big deal in that scenario, because likely she's not going to be a star performer through the wintertime. So as long as you're using Formic, 80 degrees, below 85 for sure. Apogard goes clear up to 105, but it's just a hair longer of a treatment. I would almost use the opportunity to go ahead and treat. And then if you do have any casualty, no problem. You're already planning on splitting and requeening. That falls right in line. But the most beautiful thing about requeening that time of year is you can take advantage of something that's nearly magical, and that's solstice queens. And there is just something special about those solstice queens late in the year. They just cruise through the wintertime. They're beautiful builders in the spring, and they're just a hair early on their development to really be super swarmy. So I think you can take advantage of all the things. You can get your honey off. You can treat. You're already planning on splitting. If you have any loss, no problem. You already have queens in place and ready to go. I think that's a big deal. I think the question you have to ask, everyone has to ask themselves, is when is it too late to split? And you have to ask yourself, it's never too late to split, as long as you know what size colony do I need going into the wintertime. Mm-hmm. If you can get a 5-frame deep into the wintertime, there's no reason why you cannot split a colony in November in Ohio. We and we'll talk about this as the year goes on, we make splits all the way through fall, nearly up to Thanksgiving. Well, how can you make that? Doesn't make any sense. You don't have time to get the queens back. You don't have time to get them going. You're right. But what we have, like Brian has, like Bruce has, and if we're planning ahead, you have little resource colonies. You have little boxes that you've been pulling queens from, or they're little splits, right? You have a beautiful, productive queen in there. And you might be in a situation where you've got double or triple deeps with 2 or 3 supers on there. Imagine having a hive that had 2 deeps, 2 supers, or 3 deeps, 3 supers. What do you think Greg is going to do come November? As I'm corralling the yard together, I'm breaking everything down, I'm combining all the things. I'm taking that colony there, and I'm splitting them into 3. I'm doing a downsizing split. I'm taking those big colonies, and we're going to break them all the way down into what I like for the wintertime. Let them go queenless. Now I'm going to go over here to one of my nukes. We're going to pull a mated queen out of there. We're going to introduce her. Now I've got 3 star performing colonies that are ready to rock and roll for the wintertime, explode coming out of the spring. And now I don't have a liability of double deep 2 supers going into the wintertime. So it's never too late to split as long as you know what configuration you need to go through the wintertime.
I think the latest that I've ever split a colony was sometime into September, and that was because now I've learned, and I'm never going to do this. I go down to Greg's, and I come home with a queen, so I had to go and make a split. But I by that point in the year, the colonies are, they've got enough brood that for me, then I think I had 10 colonies. So for me to pull a couple frames of brood out, and make up, I have that Apame 7 framer to make up a small little split. It's not difficult. And this was actually the first winter that I ever overwintered, a smaller colony like that. That colony is going gangbusters right now.
Yep.
It's just,
Can I tell you guys a secret? It's just us 3. I've probably said this before. And I had, there's a lot of things that we never have. What's the word I'm looking for? Sometimes you do things on the farm or in the bee yard or just in life, and you just do it because it's working. You don't know why it's working. But then sometimes God may put somebody in your path, and it might give you enough validation to say, oh my gosh, well, that's why this was working. Or wait a minute, I'm not the only one. This does work. But I can remember cruising around late night with Bob Benny, cruising around Florida, and Bob asked, so Greg, what's your overwintering strategy? And so I talked to him, and I said, Bob, even in Ohio, we can get 5 frame single mediums to overwinter. And he goes, oh, that's interesting. I bet you're making late queens, aren't you? And I said, well, yeah, that's exactly how we're doing it. He goes, those late queens always make best queens going through the wintertime. I didn't understand it because with our management and raising nukes and queens, we have been guilty. We give all the customers the best, right? Constantly. It's very hard to say no, right? They need a nuke, they need a split, this, whatever, boom, boom, boom. Bees are going out of here. And sometimes we have a situation where we're leaner than we want. So we're going into the winter time and we're combining stuff, and it's straggler sized colonies, and they have a lot of broodless opportunities, which really helps, I think, with the mites. But we weren't being, to use the word that Bruce likes to use, we weren't being intentional with intentionally trying to set ourselves up in a 5 frame single medium. That is not my preferred method, but that's what we had, right? We were in the situation where that many queens, this many bees, this configuration, this equipment, so send it. And we found out, hey, we can actually get a lot of these to make it through the wintertime, but only if they were virus free. So in those situations there, you have to understand, you have to experiment a little bit, and you have to find out for yourself, what is the smallest size colony that I can get through the wintertime that will come out of the spring and be productive? That's going to be different for everybody based on how they're managing mites, how they're managing feed, how they manage their colonies, their equipment, their size, and what their goals are and where they're located. So there's no silver bullet answers, but just spend a little bit of time figuring out, okay, what can I get by with? What can't I get by with? And those are really big things to learn that'll just catapult you as you move forward working on overwintering. Because believe it or not, we're going to be talking about overwintering in like a month.
That's crazy.
Bruce, I think you're muted there, buddy.
Didn't mean to do that. We're going to harvest in the next few weeks here, and then it's pretty much let's just get ready for winter. And so this year, I think my strategy is going to be totally different. I do want to talk to you a little bit, Greg, about a game plan moving forward, just trying some things. But anyway, here's another question. I don't want to spend very long on this one. I have several that were in the other comment section, but this is actually something that people deal with, I think, quite a bit. And so it says, Icy Mountain Honey says, I have a slightly spicy hive. I want to requeen with a better queen from a nuke. The flow is on, no dearth here. Spicy like a few follow me to the house, and if outside they agitate, please advise. And so It's basically one of these things where you got just this chippy colony that just follows you around the yard when you're out there messing around. You just want to take care
Chippy.
of the problem. It's
I like that
spicy,
word.
chippy,
Chippy.
whatever you want to call it.
Chippy
Just
sounds like corned beef hash, or the spicy sounds like some Zatarain's or something. A little different
well,
there, but
yeah, okay.
Bruce, you have a lot of experience. You have the most experience in this arena. So please, what would you do?
Well, I mean, I don't. If they're in her yard, it's a little different. Most of mine that are mean are obviously away from where I'm at, so I don't have to deal with them that much. But really, it's just a matter of. I will tell you this. I think that if you break them down into smaller colonies, if you split them, it helps. But I think the best thing to do is just to requeen those suckers. That's the best thing I know to do. And sounds to me like she wants to. There's a flow on. Maybe she's trying to get honey off of them. So if you break them down, that might mess up your honey situation. But I think replacing that queen, I just it's just tough if you're in a flow and you want to get honey to do much with them. But man, last year that's kind of one thing we did. We got your queens down here, and went in late July, and it wasn't the best time of the year to do it. You remember how kind of nasty they were? Oh my gosh, Brian, thank you. Yeah, Brian says he's going to come help harvest honey, and that's awesome. I'm grateful for anybody that comes helps, but I think you got to just replace that queen or else move them away. You really can't. They're not going to change their attitude that I know of anyway, except for changing those genetics somehow. If they're out away from the house, if you can move them further away, that's one option to get that honey in and do it after the season. Or if they're in your yard and they're messing with you and or your neighbors, and you got to do something about it, you just got to figure out a way to break them down and split them and or replace that queen. Another thing that Bob Benny talks about is just moving the colony away. And it doesn't have to be, not the foragers. The foragers are the ones that typically create the problem, the guard bees and the older bees. And so if you can just kind of take that colony away, and when the foragers are gone and move it to another spot, then it usually calms them down enough to work them. And that Bob Benny talks about just taking boxes and moving around from the bee yard. You got a mean one, you just move it to a different spot. And then they calm down, you're more workable. And so that's another strategy that he uses. But if you want to permanently fix them, you got to replace the queen. That's the only thing I know to do. What do you think, Greg?
Yeah, I think you got to consider why. And some things we don't have answers, but we have a lot of questions, and so it's important to ask the questions, even though we probably can't get to the answers. But why are colonies spicy? I think it comes down to probably, about three things. You either have spicy hives because you have something internally, right? You either have that pressure. You might have mites or a pest load inside of the colony, or pests even outside of the colony, just raising all kinds of cane with those colonies, skunks, possums, coons, going into free lunchers, right? So that's going to be a short window, I think, of an attitude. Then you get into a situation where I tried to explain this to the kids at the talk last week at the school, and I had to be careful because I'm in a room full of women and then their moms. And so I had to be really careful how I go about saying this. So I just put it on me immediately. And I said, okay, if dad's having a bad day and I wake up and I'm not feeling good and I'm grumpy and I'm just, the weight of the world's on my shoulders. And although I don't mean anything by it, maybe I'm short tempered, or I'm grumpy, right? We all have those bad days. That's going to start to rub off on everybody. Now they're going to start having a bad day. They're going to start acting in the same way. So sometimes it can be just that. The problem could just be that the paternal unit. All right. But I think also, have you ever seen, some people, like, it doesn't matter who it is in their family, grandma is a bitter mess, mom's a bitter mess, the daughters are a bitter mess, even the sons in the family are a bitter mess. I don't know that bitterness is genetic. Sometimes it seems like it is. So I think with bees, you have a situation where just mama's bitter, right? She's having a bad day, or she's just a bitter queen. You remove her, and a lot of times, I think, Bruce, you've seen that nearly instantly, removing the queen from the equation, a lot of times solves the question. And what comes to mind, Brian? What is my favorite movie?
Heck, didn't you say, what was it? Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're always going to think of Wizard of Oz and Queens. But do you guys remember when when the Wicked Witch set the scarecrow on fire, Dorothy grabs the bucket of water to put the scarecrow out and gets the Wicked Witch wet, right? I'm melting, and she's dead, she's dead. Now all of a sudden Dorothy's freaking out and she's looking up at all those guards, those big spooky guards, right? And she's waiting for them to react and then react on her, but they don't. They've been waiting for her to be dead forever, and it's ding dong, the Wicked Witch is dead, all hail Dorothy, right? Just like that, the entire castle dynamic changed as soon as the Wicked Witch was out of the equation. So I think a lot of times we just have Mrs. Gulch needs removed from the equation and everything's fine. Sometimes though, I think it can be genetic, and you have to wait for at least 45 days, get through where all those bees in the colony are dead, and then all of the brood from the new queen take over, emerge, and then I think you can have a whole new dynamic in the hive. So it can be a quick thing, it can be a long-term thing, and it can just be a mediocre outside pressure or inside mite thing, I think. So consider all that as you make whatever choice you want. But don't always remember, all hail Dorothy, the Wicked Witch is dead.
I like it. I like it. It's it is interesting how sometimes literally as soon as that new queen emerges, it's like the whole colony calms down. It's just crazy, like what you're saying. You get that new queen in there, and something about her pheromones or something about her attitude or something she's given off just seems to influence the entire colony. Sometimes not, but usually in my experience, it seems like that change can occur pretty quick. I want to change topics a little bit here. I have a question from here, and I think this will be a pretty quick answer. Let me go ahead and have it pop up here. Should pop up here pretty quick. Ryan, wait a minute, it didn't pop up. Oh, it's 2. Why isn't it popping up? There it is. All right, from Roy Boyd. Is it safe and this is just a straight up question, Greg, I think you probably know this. Is it safe to reuse frames with comb that had EFB, which stands for European foul brood, but was treated with terramycin and appear to be clean now? Someone please answer this. I've heard several different things.
I have never had European foul brood. I've never seen European foul brood. So anything that I would say would just be regurgitating something that I heard from somebody else. So I got to pass on that one.
Well,
what about you guys?
That's interesting because I have had it. And here's the thing about European foul brood that I found. People hear the word foul brood and they often seem to equate it with American foul brood, and they're totally different. The truth is that in my experience with European foul brood, I haven't really seen a case of that I know of lately, but over the years, I've seen a few cases of it, especially if the bees are if they're just not healthy, like during a time of year that's real stressful for them, if they don't have the resources they need, like maybe during a dearth. But my experience is that the bees, a strong colony, if they if they're experiencing European foul brood coming out of winter and they just look kind of sickly and bad, as soon as that spring flow hits, it's like gone. I mean, they clean it out, they take care of it. There's no problem. I have used terramycin and it helps clean it up too, but it is possible, I believe, the bees, a strong colony will take care of European foul brood. So to me, it's nothing. I don't get freaked out about it. It doesn't bother me. I take care of that. It's not nearly as scary as American foul brood. I don't know that I've ever seen. I don't think I've ever seen a case of American foul brood. American foul brood, you got to burn the colony. But yes, I reuse frames. I have, when they straighten it out, you can't even tell. So that's what my experience has been with it. It's not a real scary thing. I mean, if I see it, I just try to make sure the colonies are healthy, or you can replace that queen, but they can rectify that situation in my experience.
Isn't it just a bacterial?
Yeah, it is. The bees just look kind of sick. Like the brood gets a little bit brownish looking, and it doesn't look, there's something about that new milk brood. And as it turns into larvae, the larvae just have a look about them. With European foul brood, they just kind of look, they just don't look right. There's something about them. It's, they're a little bit brown in color. They look drier. The larvae don't look quite right. They just don't look quite right. And, but the bees, they figured if it's a strong colony, they fix it. They just usually fix it pretty quickly. And if
if I seen something like that here, I'd probably, my thoughts go to if it's a bacterial thing or it's a health or a gut biome thing. I think one of the first things I'd probably I could be dead wrong, but I would be interested in putting some pro DFM, getting them inoculated once a week, just to help with the probiotic. But then I would also be interested in putting a thymolated syrup on either a Hive Alive that has thymol in it, or maybe a small dose of Apogard with the thymol to help with the overall gut health. But those are things that I could be totally off base, and if I am, I don't. Sorry, that's where my mind goes on bacteria.
I think you're spot on, and I do think that I think the probiotics do help with that. I think they're really good. So that's a short answer to that. If you're on here, Roy, that's kind of my experience has been that EFB is nothing to be super concerned about. I mean, you don't want to have it, but it's not like you got to bring your equipment or you got to get rid of equipment type thing. In my experience, it seems to be fine. So. Let's see, man, questions are rolling in. And once again, it says right here, Ovan, larvae is supposed to be bright white, but they will be very light brownish. That's right. It looks kind of like I said, like kind of like a light brownish color. It's just kind of a weird, it just doesn't look healthy. It looks different. It just looks off, but they continue. It seems like it. Not really. In my experience, it doesn't seem to. It just looks sickly, but it doesn't look like ropey, or it doesn't smell or look like death like American foul brood would. It doesn't look really bad.
Can I ask a question overall because we got a bunch of beekeepers on here, but I've noticed something, and I can't, it sometimes will scare the tar out of me. I'll be like honey, for instance. This last fall, when we would uncap honey, it would taste amazing, but it would smell like straight apple cider vinegar. I'll be working my colonies, and sometimes out of middle of nowhere, I'll get a smell of groundhog or something else. But I'll also be driving down the road, and out of middle of nowhere, it'll smell like Sanibel Island, or it'll smell like a trash heap. Or I'm wondering if there's such a thing as some kind of a olfactory thing with us after we're all trying to deal with whatever repercussions of COVID. Out of the blue, we'll just smell weird stuff, just like out of nowhere. I'll look around like, what in the world is that? So I got to be careful if I'm in a colony and I smell something. When you're looking at a beautiful sheet of honey or a frame of honey and you're uncapping it and it tastes amazing and everyone around you is enjoying it and you smell it and you almost don't even want to eat it because you're smelling apple cider vinegar, it's almost as though your body is like smelling the opposite. Like if I smell something yeasty, like a frame of pollen and nectar, even right now, like there's almost a half a second of, oh, that's bad, but no, that's not. No, it's not. And then you said, anyways, if anyone experiences that, shoot me an email at naturesimagefarm@gmail.com. I'd like to try to figure out what in the world that is, if that goes away, or if this is like a long-term thing that we deal with just as our bodies are dealing,
Yeah, I don't know. I do catch kind of funky smells sometimes too, but I don't know that I've ever had COVID. So I think I know I got sick, but I never tested positive for it. But I do have the antibodies, but I did take the vaccine. So who knows? And I'm still here amazingly after taking the vaccines. I did survive it, so that's kind of interesting.
I didn't take it, Bruce, and I survived here. So we're like
I know. If I had to do it again, I wouldn't take it, knowing what I know now. But working in the medical field, right at ground zero,
you were kind of had no choice, really.
I had a choice. I had a choice, but it was, every time I get a little cough or a little sniffle, I thought, oh my gosh, do I have it? And so
COVID.
It's just really, honestly, and when you're seeing people literally die.
Yeah,
it's kind of it's a little bit intimidating.
It's just us here, but Bruce, after you got that vaccine, go like this.
I know, man, it's weird.
Look at that. You see that?
What the?
I know.
What?
Look at
that. Mine just comes off. I can put it back, but
yeah. Man, there's so many more questions here. So many more questions here. By the way, if anyone's wondering, I did lose a finger to a table saw accident back in 2014. So
were you building bee boxes?
I was, yes. Actually, I was.
Oh man.
Not that you lost your finger, but at least you were building bee boxes instead of like a credenza or something.
Okay. Let's just kind of shift a little bit. And guys, there are more questions about, we've answered 2 or 3 of these questions. Are like 15 or 16. So we're not going to get to all of them, but let me just pick a couple here real quick. Straight Creek apiary. I think they might be on here tonight. Let me see if I can get this question in here. I'm a little slow at doing this, but I'm trying to get them so they'll pop up on the screen. They don't need to know how many subscribers they have. Let's see. I don't need that.
Hey, Bruce.
Yes.
It's on the screen.
Oh, is it okay? All right.
Nice.
How'd you do that, Brian? Did you put it up there? Did you put it up there or did I? Did I put it up there?
I did.
So you could tell which one I was looking at?
It's on that page, yeah.
You knew which one I was looking at the time? Okay. All right. Well, anyway. Yeah, so there are a couple questions on actually when to add boxes, honey boxes and so forth. And this is a good question. So we'll address it here. And I'm going to actually, there's a follow-up one as well. Let me see if I can get it here ready. So,
the first question is, what are your thoughts on putting a medium undrawn super between the brood boxes for a week so they will draw out more quickly than putting it back on top? Is this a multiple part thing?
I don't think so. I think it's kind of like wondering, hey, should you put, if you want to get it drawn out quickly, should you put a medium super between your two deep brood boxes? I would say no. The reason I would say that is because, they'll draw it out, but that queen will start laying in there. As soon as there's fresh white wax, even if it's not even fully drawn out, she starts popping eggs in there. They love that brand new foundation. And not that you can't go ahead and put it above the excluder, put it up above, and then they'll backfill it with honey. That happens sometimes, but I would put it above the brood box, but underneath another honey super, if that makes sense. I wouldn't put a queen excluder on there initially. If you're a brand new beekeeper, you're trying to get to dry out comb for the first time, I would probably just slap it up there and just let them start drawing it out and let them get up in there. And then I would add a queen excluder later, make sure the queen, queen is down below.
Yeah.
But that's how I would do it. I wouldn't put it between the two brood boxes. It would work. They draw it out, I think, quickly, but to me, they would just look at that as another brood spot. And I don't know. What do y'all think? I would probably not do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
It would work. It would be
that.
fine, but I just think it would.
I mean, and them jokers, seriously, they would have a small little round spot like this of that brand new wax, and the whole center that's going to be filled with eggs.
Oh, they start laying it. They love those. If you do that, they love that. They'll fill that up with eggs immediately.
I'll be the contrary farm setter here, and I will say absolutely, but only if they are not going up above that double to draw the medium. No matter what you can't get them to go up, and you start to see them plug out. You start to see them make drones everywhere, and those knuckleheads just won't go up. I do it here all the time, and we'll slip that medium in just so they start drawing it. And then sometimes what you see, like Bruce mentioned, the trade-off is that, you might have the queen move in there to lay because it's the only place for her to lay at the time. To me, that is not a problem at all. I'll let her do that, and then I'll end up putting that box over top of that double deep. I'll make sure I remove her, shake her, put her down below. And then put that excluder in, let everything hatch out above the excluder, but be mindful if you've got eggs that they could potentially draw queen cells on there if it's above the excluder, above that double deep. But a lot of times you have to do that. The other thing I think to consider that you could do is you could do what we just mentioned, but shake the queen down back into the deeps, leave that medium on top with no excluder, and then put a fresh box on top of that and see if that is enough movement above the deeps to have just one medium under another, if that gives them enough to go up. And then you might be in a situation where you can get both boxes drawn. But a lot of times we have to, we can ask them to do something and we can put that super on top, or sometimes we have to tell them to do something. And that is doing something that there's more of a trade-off, like putting that super in between and then just adjusting accordingly.
And a lot of it matters to what the honey flow is. If you have, for example, drawn comb already, you can go ahead and get them working that, and then you can move the drawn comb up and put it underneath there, and she'll start drawing it up. And so, it works. It definitely works. It's not a bad idea, but she may lay some eggs in there. But
just know the trade-off. And
you can, if you put it above an excluder and they go up, because once they've been working, they'll probably go up to it. then you just got to realize it's going to need to be 21 days or longer before you pull honey off of there, because that brood will need to develop, mature, and emerge, and then they need to backfill it. So,
or not, or you end up letting them go up there and work that. They start to, if she has 2 or 3 frames of brood in there, right, and they start drawing everything out, and they start to put nectar in, no problem. Pull those mediums out, throw them on a different colony, add some frames on the outside of that box. Now they're already up and down working nectar, so you could remove the brood scenario out of there without a latency in time. There's lots of ways to think about it. Just know what the trade-off is.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. It's just something I don't, maybe because I have quite a bit of drawn comb already. I just don't typically do that.
It's drawing the comb I see this every single year with beginning beekeepers, because let's see. Well, we don't have any in the back here, but our standard hive kit that we sell is double deeps and then a medium. And most colonies, they'll get through bottom deep, no problem. Second deep, pretty much no problem. And they're flirting with whether or not to go in that super or not. And they're like, okay, there's still a lot of season left. They don't quite want to go up there, but they're jammed down these double deeps. What do we do? 9 times out of 10, that's the exact recommendation is slip it right in between, let them try to draw it out, and then we can gamble. We can also use that box as a bridge too. And we can just leave that medium over top of those double deeps, let mama have all that space, and then put us another super above that and see if, okay, will she stop making brood after the double deeps into that medium? Okay, cool. Though she'll go back down and keep laying in here after they exhaust those nectar resources. And then we can just have that second super on top. And sometimes that's just nothing but beautiful sheets of honey.
One thing I've done this year, and if you're in that situation that you're talking about, Greg, one thing I've done this year is I've flirted with single brood chamber management a little bit as far as honey goes. Typically, I go double deeps or deep in a medium for my brood chamber for my honey production colonies. But this year, I've just been freaking out about not having any honey come in. And so some of these new splits I made this year, I just went ahead and actually slapped an excluder over the top of them and put comb right over them. And man, they've moved up and filled those things up. And they're doing well. I've got some of those things stacked way high, and they're just filling it up right now with the tallow flow going. And so if you're a new beekeeper in that scenario, it is possible too, Greg, to maybe consider single deep management, and that way they could fill out. If you want to get some honey supers drawn out, that's one way to do it as well. Just a thought.
Single deep worries me with beginners.
That's true.
There's a lot to go wrong in a hurry. But
that is true.
It depends on their risk tolerance, I guess. You got to there's a lot going on there that can get by you quick when you really heavy populate a single box. Works awesome, but man, you got to be on point.
It is an experience thing. Greg, or actually Matt is asking that question right here. It's kind of has to do with that, but it says, do you have a percentage plus minus single brood hives versus double deep hives with honey production? Honestly, what I do typically is I kind of just judge the strength of a colony, the age of a colony, the maturity of a colony. And I literally have bees at all 3 levels. I've got double deeps, single deeps, and deep and mediums for my brood chambers. And then, I just kind of let them fill up to that point, and I kind of watch them. And then when I put the honey supers on, I don't mess with that brood chamber much until I take them off. I just kind of let them do their thing. And Hill Hive says, so you have tallow coming on, Bruce. We're still hopefully waiting. Yes, we've got a good tallow flow going right now, but had no spring flow at all. And I was going to address that as we close it out, kind of, because there's a lot of folks on here that went on at the beginning, but talking about how that's working for me right now. I've actually took one of those little, just walking around, popping the lid and looking in at several of my colleagues yesterday afternoon down in Slocum. Just a little 8 or 9 minute video, maybe even shorter after I edit it, where you can kind of look at it and see how the colonies are doing right now. So that'll be if I can get that thing edited and up, I should have it up in the next couple of days. Hopefully you can see how they're doing now. This question here goes along with, and Greg, this is good for beginners, a really good question for beginners. Rock Creek. Oh man, I'm so bad at this.
You're doing great, Bruce.
All right. Rock Creek Bee says, love your channel. How long after you add your first super should you wait to check the progress? Thank you. That's a really good question. There's probably a lot of new beekeepers on here, and they're probably wondering, hey, I put my super on there. When should I check it again? Whoops, let me put it back on. What do you think, Greg? You got your bottom, you got your deep full, maybe your double deep full. Now you're putting your super on there. What do you think?
Well, it it gets complicated because if are we in taking a look at the hive or just taking a look at the super progress? For me, I've never seen bees take an entire super of undrawn foundation, draw it out, load it full of nectar, and have it all capped in less than a week. Maybe in some parts of the country,
Yeah,
maybe
you're
it
right.
happens. I've never seen that here. So getting in before 7 days, I don't know, makes a lot of sense. I would say at 7 days, crack the lid and just take a look straight down and see if you're starting to see wax all the way out, and then get in there and judge it every week to see how just quickly go in and take a look. The other thing you have to keep in mind though too is for what we're doing, I am always also checking in on the queen if I can and what situation the brood is in, because one thing that's happening here is it doesn't take long at all. I have hives right now that are absolutely pollen and nectar bound, just boom, 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 boom. The flow has been so phenomenal, that the pollen's been so incredible, that they are just backfilling every nook and cranny. So I want to be mindful of that. So while these knuckleheads are out doing what they should be doing, bringing back nectar, what I don't want them doing is just absolutely constricting the brood nest where mama's got no place to lay. And then we're in a situation where we're not in the colony for every 2 weeks checking on the super to make sure it's evaporated and capped. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, down in the brood nest, mama's got no place to lay, and they went ahead and started making queen cells, and we don't catch them. And then we might get a super or two of honey off, but then half the colony leaves and that's it. So it's a weird kind of a balance for me. I don't have a good answer that you can hang your hat on and say, every 11.3 days, get in there and do this and do that. I think you just have to be mindful of your weather, the flow, but more importantly, just crack a lid. Never hurts just to crack the lid and look. Just look in the top and see how far along are those frames progressed. What do you think, Brian?
I had to unmute there. I had a quail that was letting me know that he is over there. I will typically, when I put them on, and this just goes back to more of like the time that I allow beekeeping to have. I typically check once a week. And that's, like what Greg said, they're not going to, fill that whole entire super out in a week. 1 week's time is good because if there's a heavy flow on and they're building out, they're building it out as far as wax and they're filling it, after a week you'll kind of know also, what do I need to put another one on. So every week is about good for me. I don't see a sense on going on sooner than that. It just no real need to.
Bruce, you're the honey man. What do you think?
Yeah.
Well, what I do, and there's a couple more questions coming up here real quick, but what I do is I just peek in and see what's going on, man. I mean, you could check it every day if you want. I don't go through them and go into them, and it's not going to disturb them. Like if you put that honey super on there, if you just want me to dry out some comb and you just slap the box on the top, I'm always just popping lids and looking and seeing what's going on in there. Now, if you're going to go into the colony and inspect the colony, that's a little different. But if you just want to see the progress, you can tell almost immediately when those bees start moving up there. And if you slap a honey box on there, like a super or even a new deep or whatever, I'd leave them. You don't need to check into them for at least a week, probably, because they're not going to be able to do a whole lot like in a day. Typically, I will tell you, it's interesting though. I went out to, I was telling you the tallow flow is just fire hose right now. It's going crazy. Where it's going crazy, other places it's not doing anything. But I went out to, I've got a new location this year where I sell all my honey at Appleton Farms, not far from here. And I peeked it on those colonies yesterday, and these were all splits from this year, if I'm not mistaken. And they're rocking and rolling. It's a good location. It's a farm out there in the middle of nowhere. And one of them wasn't as strong. And so I moved a honey box from that one over to another one. And literally, like today, I did that last night, and today they were starting to fill those frames up with nectar. Like you could tell it was like that quick, like within less than 24 hours, they were starting to fill them with nectar. So in a good flow, they'll do a lot. But the comb is the key there. If you've got comb, they'll start putting it right in there. But if they've got to draw it out, it takes them some
Mhm.
time. And so there's nothing wrong with just peeking in, popping the lid, looking in there, seeing how they're doing. That's not going to hurt anything, and then closing it back down. And you can tell pretty quick. But you really don't need to get in them for a week or two, honestly. If they're just drawing out new foundation, a week to 10 days, there's no reason to really do that. But if you're just curious, if you're a new beekeeper, you want to look, there's nothing wrong with doing that. I wouldn't go through the colony every day, but just to look in and see how they're doing, there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think.
Bruce, what's the fastest you've seen them draw out foundation and then have it capped? Like, can you, is there like a point in time you've seen that where you're like, wow, that's quick?
I can't tell you exactly, but if you're in the middle of our tallow flow here and it's a good year and the trees are just blooming and the bees are buzzing, they're happy. I've seen them do it like in 7 to 10 days, just fast. And what I usually do for them to do that is if I just slap a super on top of a brood chamber and don't have, it may take a little bit longer, but if I've got a box, say, of honey that's capped, I've drawn comb and capped and everything. And then if I under super with a box of foundation, especially if there's like empty comb above that, the bees are having to go across it. They can't stand that empty space, and they'll draw it out. Quick. They'll get right on it fast. Yep. But if they're just trying to go up there and there's nothing above it, no stimulation to walk across, it may take a little longer. But in a good flow, they got to put it somewhere.
Yep.
And they'll go ahead and put it somewhere. I did have a couple more questions here, and we need to start winding this thing down. This has been really good, guys, and we appreciate all the questions, man. Y'all have done some great questions, and I think this is a little bit of one that can take a little time, but I don't want it to take a long time. Maybe we can get a fairly quick answer out of it. But this is something I think that I've dealt with this year. It's a 2-part question here. I couldn't get it all in one. Nick Zooks said, I had some rough weather for getting queens mated. Me too this year. I noticed a laying worker condition and the queens start laying at the same time, which I don't know if I've ever seen that exactly happen. Then he says, I did see them capping the drone brood in the worker size cells too. How common is this? Any other tips to make better mating nukes? So what I saw this year, I think I've seen more drone layers this year than I've ever seen all my other years of beekeeping combined. And typically, I believe that's because the queens didn't get mated very well. And I think the queens started laying. So all you have is drones, but they weren't mated well. So they weren't laying fertilized eggs. And like Nick says here, I saw them laying these eggs in worker-sized comb cells. But if it's a drone egg, they just turn it into a drone. They can't, it's just going to turn into a drone. They can't keep it from turning into a drone. And so the drones might be a little smaller than typical drones, but they're going to be drones. They're not going to be workers if that queen is not mated well. That might be what you're talking about, Nick, there. I'm not sure. I would say, he says, about making better mating nukes. I don't know if it's the nukes or the splits that are the problem as much as the weather, the availability of drones. Those are 2 things to consider. If you say you have weather problems, then maybe that queen just wasn't able to get out during her prime mating time and get mated. Maybe she got gobbled up. Well, if she was in there, then she didn't get gobbled up by a dragonfly or something. But my guess is the weather kept her in the hive. I think that's what happened to a bunch of mine. The weather just kept them in the hives. They weren't able to get mated good. Only some of them got mated early in the year. Jason says, I agree. I've seen laying workers occurring faster this year. Jason, I haven't seen a lot of laying workers, I don't think, man. Mine has mostly been I think drone layers. I've seen a couple laying workers, but man, the drone layers, just queens that aren't, there's 1 to 2 eggs in the cells. It's not like a bunch of eggs in most of the cells. To me, that's a laying worker. So that's kind of what I've noticed.
We lost Greg.
I wonder what happened to Greg. Yeah, there he comes. He's popping back in here. Greg, could you hear us talking? Did you hear what we were saying?
No, but I heard it was from Nick Zook, so I want to make sure we hear the question. He's a good dude here in Ohio. What was the question?
It's about drone. Well, he said laying workers. I wonder if he's describing more of a drone layer situation. He said he saw the queen in there laying at the same time, but they were all turning into drones. And so let me see if we can find it. Brian, do you see that? It kind of cut off the screen.
He's seeing a lot of drones, but a queen's in there. I got
Well,
a
here we
feeling.
go. Here we go. Right here. Let me see.
Oh, you got it.
This is the first part of the question. Nick, he says, I had some rough weather for getting queens mated, which I did too. I noticed a laying worker condition and a queen start laying at the same time. He says, I did see them capping the drone brood in worker size cells too. How common is this? And any other tips on making better mating nukes? I think what he's probably seeing, and I could be wrong, I think he's probably seeing a drone laying situation if the queen is in the colony. Would you agree? Because they turn into all drone brood. If a drone layer, it all turns into drone brood, and they do lay in regular size cells
Well,
because she thinks she's laying
there could be
regular
a
eggs.
lot
Maybe.
going on there. I mean, maybe. First, I want to thank Nick for his support. He's been out here at the shop and bought supplies, and I'm excited for him because he's using one of our queens from last year that overwintered as grafting stock for queens that he's selling and queens that are in his nukes. So, Nick, I appreciate you, and I'm excited to see what those queens do. Knowing that he's making nukes and making queens, I'm gonna go on a limb here to say he probably started grafting at probably about the same time that we did. And he probably found himself in a situation where he was in a time period where those queens were just poor performers. We were in the beginning of the stream. We're talking about just that during that cold and wet snap. It actually set us back to almost 14 days total, if you really think about it, just with 7 days of bad weather. And in that time frame, what we saw in our colonies is either A, no queen, nobody was home, or B, we're seeing drone layers. And what you have in that situation is there's a queen in there, but she never got mated. So she's going around laying, trying to do her thing. She's even developed, and she's a plump-looking queen, but she's just firing nothing but drones. In those cases, that's a pinch. There's, boom, move on, drop another queen cell. So in his situation, let's see, Brian, today is what are we in? We're in May 20-ish something.
24th.
24th. So he would have had to had a situation where he went queenless. It had to have been that third week of April or the last week in April. From what in my experience, it takes about 4 weeks for the most part to really get into that laying worker situation. Not to say it can't happen sooner or later, but for the most part, it's about, what I've seen, it's about 4 weeks. So in that situation there, if he was grafting like us at Easter, the first week in April, he wouldn't even had cells to drop until the third week, or would have been ready. So boom, the timing there, 14 days, 16 days, 21 days. I'm thinking what he's probably seeing is just maybe not laying workers unless he made splits prior to and all that, anticipating on the queens. Those went queenless. The queens he gave them never came back on the flight during the rain. Then they went into that could be. What would be interesting to know is if that was the time frame, if he had a situation that it was queenless, that it did go into laying workers at the time that somehow they just barely were starting, they would let the queen cell be in the colony and then emerge at the same time laying workers were laying. He might be in a rare window where they actually accepted the queen. That could be, but I would venture to say if he looks, it's probably just a poorly mated queen, and she might be firing some workers. She might be firing off some drones. Either way, in that situation, he's going to do the right thing, which is just pinch that queen, drop another cell.
What I've seen a lot this year of this exact scenario, basically, except I haven't seen 100% laying workers. What I've seen is worker cells with 1 to 2 eggs in them, maybe 3, but sometimes multiple eggs, but not like 15, and not like laying workers. And then so I'm like, well, maybe we got us a queen in here, but it seems like it's always delayed after the properly mated queens start laying and there's brood in there. You still see this phenomenon to where you're seeing 1 or 2 eggs in a cell.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, maybe it's going to work out because I see eggs, but then you go in a week later and it's nothing but drone brood. The hive's just unhappy. They're just, nothing but drone brood, and it's just a laying worker. I rarely see the queen in those instances. I don't know why. I guess I'm not sure why, but that's typically what I'm seeing. And I bet I've seen 10 or 15 of those this year. I've seen them. I don't know if I've ever seen a true drone layer. I've seen some laying workers before, but a true drone layer until this year. And I have seen, but it's because they've been poorly mated. We had weird
It's the weather. It's been terrible.
But the later, like with Corey's queens, that came, and I put them in there later. They got mated perfectly. They're doing great. The ones, they're all looking good. And so the ones that are in there, I'm going to update in just a minute on that. But
Timing's everything.
it was just the early ones I did at the end of February, early March were just, last year I came off really good with those. I was lucky. The weather cooperated. This year, the weather was just strange during that time. And I had like less than a 50% take on those queens. Now it's interesting because the one hive I split into 4, I've done several videos and follow-up videos on that I went and checked on them yesterday, and I just took a big double deep and broke it into 4, laid them on the same pallet with cells.
Yep.
And 2 of them have 2 boxes stacked up on them. I think one of them has 3 boxes stacked on them, packing them with honey. One of them isn't doing that well. I think it's just kind of fizzle. It's just not that strong. But the other 3 are all just busting, doing great. And that was even before I did what I call my early splits. But there was a little period of time in there where we had a warm 3 or 4 weeks. There were drones everywhere.
Right.
It was just a warm time. And I think those queens got mated and back. Whereas 2 weeks later, when I pulled the next splits, we had some weird weather come in the first couple of weeks of March that just screwed everything up. And so it's just, when you're doing those early splits down here, probably anywhere, but especially down here, weather really can fool you because you think, man, it's springtime in February. And then in March, you just get hammered with cold weather, weird rainy weather. And that's what happens. So it's risky to do that.
And I don't know if it's early splits. I mean, definitely the earlier in the time for all of us, it seems to be cooler and wetter, but there's not to say we can't have last year, I remember we had two stretches of weather where we had 5 to 7 days in a row of rain that were spread out like 2.5 weeks. That is an absolute nightmare if you are grafting and trying to regraft and to get other things going on in there again. I was hoping Nick would make another comment because I can't see the comments at all.
He said, that's what this is. April 20th, I dropped these cells. Looked like laying. Worker queen was laying at the same time. I left her in there. Now a month later, they seem to have worked it out, keeping her around for now. Well, there you go.
Okay.
That answers the question.
There you go. Awesome.
The follow-up part of that question was, how can I make better mating nukes? And I just wonder if the nukes were fine if it was just more of a weird weather situation. I don't know. Hard to say. I know that during a prime part of the season, you don't need a lot of, I mean, I've always made my splits pretty strong, but you don't need a lot of bees or a lot of strength in a split to be able to get in a mating nuke. But during certain parts, they need to be stronger. But
that's a big deal.
Anyway, it's getting kind of late in the chat. Well, we always say an hour to an hour and a half, or hour and a half is max. And here it is, 2 hours. And I mean, I feel like we're just getting going good. We got a lot of 181 people on here still, but I wanted to do and I apologize for anyone that asked questions on my community post. If I didn't get to it, I may do that again in the future. And we do appreciate and if we missed some questions in the comment section, I apologize as well. Greg, thanks for the super chat. But we, it's just the ones that kind of jump out sometimes are the super chat, super stickers. But we did have those questions pre-done, and I really appreciate that. So we're going to start to wind it down here. But one of the questions that I have was, gosh, I don't see who it was from. It was from Kevin Williams. He said, Bruce, can you give us an update on Corey Stevens Queens? I'm going to say that I'm very well pleased with them. The video dropped on Saturday of that experience, and it's kind of a long video, but it's all three segments of that process. I didn't do the actual splits on there, but all 3 parts of queen introduction are on that video. Thanks, Brian. You didn't have to do that, man. But basically, the video, if you can go back and watch on the channel, it's the most recent video I've posted as of right now. I've got a couple more coming out soon, but I show receiving the queens, putting them in. Then I show going in and removing the tape so the bees can eat through the candy. And then I show the results all in the same video. So there's a lot of information in that video. Thanks so much, Matt, for checking in over there in Texas. Sounds like Matt mentioned earlier his tallow flow is about over. Next couple of weeks, it'll be about over. And ours is not too far behind that. But I'm pleased with it. The results, you can watch the video to see the details and see exactly what happened. I went 8 for 12. 2 of them were bad splits. When I introduced the queens, I could tell something was a little bit strange. And I think I even mentioned in the video in a couple of them. I mentioned in one of them, but 2 of them were kind of the same way. When I followed up to take the tape off of the little queen things, there were a couple. One of them I think was getting robbed out. Then I tried to fix it, and the other one I wasn't sure. Same type thing, and two of them just died out. I think the splits were too weak, and so the queens didn't have a chance. So I almost don't want to even count those. But of the rest of them, we got 8 takes. Beautiful little queens. I painted them orange. So I can, kind of like we painted Greg's pink, his Corey's are orange, so they'll kind of stand out from the rest of them. I'm going to start moving them to different bee yards a little bit here in the near future. And one of them actually had gotten injured or damaged somehow. She had one wing, and so there was a queen in that colony. She got released, and the bees accepted her, but she wasn't able to lay, or she wasn't lay. She was not a mated queen. Thanks so much, Jason. I appreciate it, man. The other one just didn't get accepted for whatever reason. So 8 out of 10 is what I'm going to say. 8 out of 12, but of good splits, 8 out of 10. Beautiful little queens are laying it up. We're going to see how they do, see what their attitude is, and now the test is really on because they're in there, they're doing their thing. So I'm going to hope to make a few follow-up videos on Corey's queens, see how they do. Brian, I know you have some you've introduced, I think today, right? You introduced 3 of them, and then Greg, you got a few coming.
Yeah.
So we're all going to have some opinions on them here pretty soon. And so that's what I'm excited about. I do want to, I've got some other queens coming out of Texas. The guy's got a good reputation. I want to try some of his, and then Greg, I want to get some more of yours, maybe hopefully around solstice or after solstice to kind of bring in I just want to kind of see what I end up with these, the VSH, and then just want to see what I end up with this combination of bees. And I'm really going to, since I'm not planning on doing pollination this coming year, I'm going to focus more on just trying to do it differently and really focus on genetics. I'm working on it already, but it's going to even be more fine-tuned hopefully here in the next couple of months. But let's see what honey we get, and then we'll move on to that phase of the summer. Hey, I really appreciate it. Brown and Daughters honey. Just another question about splits. Cotton's about a month out, temps in the 90s. Too late to do splits. We've kind of talked about that. It's really not, but later summer splits you got to be careful about. If you go back and watch earlier chat, we talk a lot about the late season splits. Greg, any quick ideas on that? You must be here in the South, Brown Daughters honey, and do appreciate the super chat, by the way.
I think the later in the year you get, typically the drier it gets, the nectar seems to shut off, pollen sometimes too. So if you're making those splits, at least in my neck of the woods, you just have to be mindful about the strength of the colony that you're doing that in. If you're making what we can get by with right now with all the tree blooms, the hardwood blooms, and then going into the ground blossoms and grass flowers and such, we can get by with an awful lot right now. And we can get by with you've heard the handful of bees and a queen cell. You can totally do that. But as we creep up and get into past Father's Day, we get into the first part of July, when we get around Independence Day, a lot of that changes. And we have to we start to tweak and tailor our size of mating nukes, the strength, our interval of when we're pulling queens, because everything just gets harder and more difficult and more challenging. A lot of things you have to focus on if you're making splits. Are you making splits and bringing mated queens in? If so, that's a completely different way to go about it. That's the least risky, and I think you can really there's way less risk in those situations. But if you're making queens or you're using swarm cells, you're forcing them down to do that, and you're trying to get them to be mated, and the strength and size of the colony. One thing you got to keep in mind is just robbing. Robbing is the absolute worst nightmare on those small colonies too late in the year. They start to get robbed. There's nobody home. Hive beetles move in. It slimes out. It's a nasty, smelly, ugly mess. The next thing you know, you're brokenhearted, disappointed, and now those splits that you were going to make and all these plans and things that you had just go right down the tubes. It's better to be more conservative, have a much larger split than you think you need the later in the year you go. And for me, that seems to really buffer and mitigate any kind of a weather or robbing frenzy that does seem to happen late in the year.
Interestingly, if you look at the comment, it's 5 a.m. there in Israel. That's where they checked in from. And
oh wow,
hey, Brown and Daughters honey, if you're on social media, if you're on Facebook, come join our Stream Team Beekeeping chat group, so you can kind of see what we're doing. We'd love to have you. Thanks for checking in from all the way over in Israel.
Wow,
my brother actually is a tour guide to Israel. He does a tour guide to the Holy Land.
I want to do that sometime.
He actually does that. he does that officially, and so that's pretty cool. I've never been. I need to get over there, but anyway, we need to probably wrap this thing up. So, got any final thoughts? Brian, why don't we start off with you? Any final thoughts? And I do appreciate all the super chats, super stickers, guys. It really helps. It helps make this worthwhile, and it helps us in what we're doing. And I've got some things in the back of my mind. I'm going to try to get some giveaways hooked up here in the near future. Hopefully, we can start doing a little bit of that. That's a lot of fun. But anyway, Brian, final thoughts.
Just want to thank everybody again. I mean, the crowd that we pull in just week after week after week, it's just
It's a great community.
it is. It's such an amazing community of people that just come together literally every week, and you know, they're here, to listen to us three talk, but it's just, you look at all the friendships that have been made. It's amazing. So yeah, I just want to thank everybody for the continued support and putting up with the three of us.
For sure.
Oh man.
Yeah.
And I'll go ahead and give my final thoughts, and we'll let Greg bring it on home. We really do appreciate you guys coming on tonight, and just stay tuned to all of our channels. Right now is a very busy time, I think, for all of us. I haven't been putting videos out as often as I was. I do have a couple that I'm kind of working on right now, one of which has way too much footage, so it's taking me a while to get it edited. The other one's not going to be a real professional video, but it's going to be interesting, I think. But that's what's coming from me. Just going to keep, I hope I can get some, my pollination bees are not looking great right now. I'm a little frustrated about that, but the rest of them in the real production areas are packing it in right now. So I'm excited to get a little bit of honey anyway, probably way less than I was wanting to get, but at least we're going to get some. And I was afraid we weren't going to get much at all, but we're going to get a decent little crop here, I think, we're going to salvage a little bit. So I'm grateful for that, for what we can get. It is farming, as they say. And when you're dependent upon Mother Nature for a honey crop, some years are not going to be as good as others. And so I too appreciate everyone for being on here, for all the super chats, super stickers, and just for the community. That's the biggest thing, the community, and you guys, the friendship with you guys. It's been awesome. And it's just been awesome getting to know you guys and being able to do this for the last year and a half. Hopefully we can keep it rolling for a while. So Greg, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us some final thoughts and then finish it out for us tonight.
Well, I'm going to encourage everybody listening tonight. If you have a favorite way of making splits, or you've got answers that are different to the questions that were asked tonight, leave some comments below in this video so we can check it out. We can all learn from each other. There's always more than one way to pluck the chicken. The more important thing is knowing how you're going to eat it. Dictates how you go about plucking that chicken. Try to figure out and understand why it is that you need to feed, why it is that you want to make a split, why it is you're doing these things in the bee yard. Then the how and the when kind of fall in line. If you just focus on the why, you can always ask yourself why, and just pester yourself with why, and then answer it, and then why, and then all of a sudden you get to the core truth of the situation. Now you can make some decisions. Now you can put some plans together. You can sort through the me, and you can take the you out of the yourself, and you can get past the ego and just look right to the thing and say, okay, well, here's actually what's going on. Here's where I want to go. How do I get there? And it helps sort through a lot of these things. As you build a business and are working in the bee yard, even if it's not a business, if it's just a couple hives in the backyard. I want to thank everybody, like, Bruce and Brian have. You guys are awesome. You make so much of this possible. My wife, 7 kids, this is what we do. Our focus is on, providing local supplies here for our folks. We ship a lot of this all over the country, whether it's wax dipped equipment, Larabi's vaporizers, you name it. That's what we do to try to support our beekeeping community. And in turn, you guys support us, and it makes it all happen. We're supporting each other, and it makes a big deal. We can't thank you enough for that. We wouldn't be here and couldn't do this without you. And so it makes a big deal. If you're interested in wax dipped equipment, if you're interested in premier bee products, foundation frames, if you're interested in instant vapes, Larabi's vaporizers, give us a chance. We'd love to earn your business. Come see us at naturesimagefarm.com. Swing by the shop out here in Hopewell, Ohio. We'd love to visit with you, answer questions, talk about bees, see if there's something that we can offer you here at the shop that'll help you with your beekeeping. We appreciate you guys. We can't say it enough. I'm looking forward to trying to get some videos out kind of as things progress around here. We're struggling with we have the cameras and the equipment and the computers and like to put together, well polished edited videos with transitions and music and tell a story and do the whole thing. It just takes so much time that takes us away from, selling supplies or working the bees, that I find myself the only content we're creating is just on like a phone. So if you would leave a comment here in Bruce's video, or shoot me an email at naturesimagefarm@gmail.com. I think the direction that we're probably going to go with most of our videos until we can get to editing interviews and the more heavier type stuff, it's probably going to be for phone format, quicker type things. I guess I'm not looking for, permission or validation to do that, but I just, I want folks to know that's kind of where we're at. And hopefully you guys can give us some feedback and say, hey, that's totally cool. Just share what you can. But just know that all the other fun stuff, the stuff that we like to geek out on with the cameras and transitions and the music and the shots and the edits, those will come later in the year. We can't do it. We can't do all the things all the time. That's just the way that it is. No matter if you have one or two colonies, if you're growing into a sideline capacity, if you're turning into a professional beekeeper where you're trying to earn some income and find ways to create revenue and do this, I just want you to know that if you feel burned out, if you feel stretched out, if you feel stressed out, that you are not alone. Every single one of us, if we're honest with ourselves, no matter the scale, we go through that. This is the time of year where a lot of us are just absolutely stretched out to the point to where we're not going to give up. We're not going to quit. We're not going to break. But that stretch burns and it hurts. And so I just want to remind folks, I've been dealing with this a lot the last couple of weeks, and I can get a little bit down on myself, and we've accomplished so much here as a family and as a business, but you're always striving to do better. You're always striving to do more, and you're stretching out. This year for us is one of the biggest stretch years where we have stretched ourselves out financially and the time that we have to put into it. And it always never feels like you're where you want to be. But I want to remind you something that I think God put on my heart is that whether you're exercising, whether you're working out, whether you're working a muscle group, if you want to grow, if you want to get to where that is that you think you're supposed to be, it's no different than exercising. It's no different than curling or lifting weights or doing push-ups. You have to stretch that muscle group. It's going to hurt. No pain, no gain. But just know that on the other side of that, you're going to be stronger. You're going to be able to do more, lift more, be more, and then reach your full potential. If you find yourself where you feel stretched out, it's okay, because I do too. And I think that's all part of the journey. So I want to thank everybody again for spending some time tonight with the Stream Team Beekeeping Chat. We're looking forward to seeing you next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Fellas, what channel is that going to be on?
Yours. Your channel, Greg.
There you have it. We'll see you here on the Nature's Image Farm YouTube channel, 8 p.m. next Wednesday night. We love you guys. We appreciate all your support. You guys mean everything to us. As always, I want to remind you to be the lighthouse and be the change you want to see in this world. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
See ya.